Thank you. We'll start by reading this. This meeting is being held remotely and or in person as an alternate means of public access pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2025 and all other applicable laws, temporarily amending certain provisions of the open meeting law. You are hereby advised that this meeting and all communications during this meeting may be reported by the town of Hingham in accordance with the open meeting law. If any participant wishes to record this meeting, please notify the chair at the start of the meeting in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 20F, so that the chair may inform all other participants of said recording. Is anyone recording the meeting? Great, seeing none. I handed out, and hopefully you all got the source of funds. You know, if you looked at the presentation for later in the meeting, we're going to talk about the fund balance a little bit more. But I think because we're going to be talking about some articles and hopefully voting some of the ones we're talking about, I thought it was appropriate to have this with us. And to the extent this raises any concerns on any of the articles I call to see if we're going to vote, please bring it up at that point in time. Otherwise, we can wait until the later presentation and circle back. Okay. So with that said, we are going to start the evening with electronic voting devices. Today, you want to have, I know we have Carol Falvey and Michael Puzo here with us. You want to put this off for us, please?
I would love to. I don't know if you're going to pull it up.
I can do that.
I want to thank everybody for everyone's thoughtful suggestions and considered input regarding this article. There's just so many helpful edits, and it's really been a pleasure to work on this. It's been a team sport. So if I do a brief history of electronic voting in Hingham, in 2013, town meeting approved creation of a study committee to study electronic voting for Hingham. In 2014, town meeting approved a bylaw change to allow for electronic voting. In 2014, town meeting approved funding for a pilot program for all town meeting in 2015. And then in 2015, we actually rescinded the funding for that pilot program, decided not to move forward with e-voting at that time, partially because of the expense, partially because we really hadn't had that many standing and ballot votes, and it just didn't make sense to move forward at that time. And so we come to Article LL for 2026. And as it says in the article, the purpose of the article is to pre-authorize an amount of up to $100,000 exclusively to the potential acquisition, configuration, and implementation of electronic voting equipment for the 2027 town meeting. So ultimately, this is a funding article. In 2014, we amended our bylaws to allow for electronic voting at town meeting. So that is not a question. So as the comment of this article explains, if this article is approved, the town administrator will appoint a task force. The task force will include the moderator, the town clerk, a select board liaison, and up to 3 town residents. The goal of the task force is to research municipal experiences, their vendors, equipment options, procurement methods, training needs, and cost estimates. And multiple people pointed out they wanted me to write in the article that the task force will not use any of the funding from this reauthorization. The findings from the task force will be shared with the town administrator, who will present them to the select board. This article authorizes the select board to approve the recommendation by the task force and appropriate the amount of money needed up to $100,000, but only as much as is required from unassigned fund balance to move forward with electronic voting devices with a goal of implementation in time for the 2027 town meeting. Does anyone have any additional questions about this article?
Anyone? Did you happen to talk to any of the other towns? I know that we've gotten feedback, but I don't know if that's just through Carol, or if you happen to.
So I did not, I read the League of Women Voters, the research that they did on electronic voting. And they reached out and spoke to, other towns about their experiences. And there's a report which, I'm happy to circulate, that has the outcome of those discussions.
No, just curious if it was a positive, obviously a positive outcome, but.
Yes, it was repeatedly positive.
Any other questions? Sorry, yes. Yep, please. Yep, please, and name and address, please. Thank you, Liz.
I'm Liza O'Reilly, 44 Florette Circle, and I serve as the chair of the steering committee of the League of Women Voters of Hingham. So I wanted to follow up on Carol's comment. And so League of Women Voters US has a position of supporting voting systems and procedures that are secure, accurate, recountable, and accessible. And so state and local leagues support this as well. And so that was the basis of us doing some research after hearing, experiencing town meetings the past couple of years and knowing that the bylaw existed. So in November, we reached out, we looked at the benchmark towns of Hingham and other nearby towns who have open town meeting and use the electronic devices. And we interviewed town clerks from 9 towns based on this assignment. And it was very welcome information. Everyone has a good experience with it. And the towns gave us some background, which I'm sure the task force will discover as well, that some towns purchase devices, some towns lease devices. It really depended on the size of the town, the capability of their staff, from the town clerk's office to the IT department, what big issues come up. And so we wholeheartedly support this article. We also have heard from the community of wanting to have trust in, all of the votes. And I think Tina shared her draft, and we talked through that the towns that have had this, people feel more positive about their town meeting. And it has helped with the efficiency. It hasn't necessarily, over time, it has reduced a little bit of time, but it has definitely gained the confidence in the meeting for the people attending and staff as well. So just wanted to add our wholehearted support for this.
Okay.
So how do we handle, well, maybe this will be part of the study, but how will we handle town meetings where there's a tremendous number of people in the overflow rooms? They'll all have devices?
Sure, no kidding. This study, I think, would have to
Oh.
figure out how many is appropriate, what are not, yeah, I'm sure the study would address that.
Oh.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Puzo?
Sure.
Just a Ben's question, Michael Puzo, 83 Cross Street. Give you a very brief, so the moderators have something called gavel line. It's an opportunity for moderators to yak at each other and share experience. So I have gone to the Wayland Town meeting. They were an early adopter of electronic vote. To Ben's question, everybody has a device. And so, of course, so the completely surmountable issues that will be raised will include, well, what if we have 2,500 people? So just as you need 2,500 seats, you'll need 2,500 devices. So among the communities that just readily come to mind, Hull, Duxbury, Westwood, North Andover, now Concord, Long Meadow, many of the communities now have devices. The use of devices varies. Some communities use it for every vote. There's a perception, which is often having gone, for example, to Wayland meeting. The early and completely uncontroversial articles tended to move more quickly by voice vote. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. And our bylaw, which allows for electronic voting, also preserves voice votes. And I'm not suggesting any comment, any preordained outcome. It's particularly useful, of course, for controversial votes, which seem to be increasingly causing anxiety for people. A kind of notion of all those in favor of the recommended motion, please stand and remain standing until your vote is counted. And people, not all people, but a significant number of people are leery to feel comfortable. And as you know, and as Tina said, when we studied this 10, 12 years ago, we concluded that there were so few, the committee which had been appointed came back and said, this is a very expensive way to avoid a periodic ballot vote. But remember, we have two ways of voting effectively. The voice vote, provided whether the moderator is endowed or a 7th vote should rise and is about to call the moderator, then we will proceed to a counted vote. The counted vote will be taken in the first instance as a standing vote, and then say provided further that if 50 voters should rise, or if the advisory committee through its designated survivor or something, State of the Union, through its designated member, or in the absence of a designated member, it's in your rules and procedures, the chair calls for a ballot vote, in which case we will have a ballot vote instead of a standing vote. We never do both. So this will allow for electronic votes, presuming it gets approved and funded. It would allow for the use of devices. Devices that I've looked at, there are a couple of vendors, and 10, 12 years ago, whatever it was, there were, I think at that point too, there might have been a third vendor, Turning Technologies. But they were kind of clunky. Technology to see improvements. And there was concern about the adequacy of basically the infrastructure in the gymnasium when it was supported. So a bunch of technical things, but obviously always other communities are able to do this on conflict that they can do. There is, and again, just to kind of give you a heads up, and the kind of stuff I focus on in conferring with or communicating with other moderators include, there now are, it's like a mutual aid and virus, you know. A lot of the communities pay attention, and I'm sure we will as well, to other communities which are nearby that have devices. And thinking like borrowing your neighbor's snowblower or something, you'd go and get additional devices. Some of the people like rentals because the company maintains them. They have batteries, like they die. So they have to be functioning in life. But those will address the issues. One observation is, if you, and again, just to preview a couple of things and not to intrude on your time. There are questions about whether you should display the count, whether the count is in a certain place. And there's reasonable minds differ on that. One of the observations is if we are running low on a quorum, it will probably become more obvious that we are. Gee, I see you have 197 abstentions. So that's just a practical issue. But I've been following it closely over time. Obviously, if the goal of town meeting, over the year, Hingham's meet is incredibly fortunate that we have maintained our commitment to open town meeting. And town meeting, to say it for the 1000th time, we don't do elections at town meeting. We vote as a legislative body. And we vote, whether we voice vote, standing votes or public. So if community members, if registered voters feel that the votes will be more accurately counted, particularly if it's a controversial matter, or that they will be private. If that enhances their desire to participate in the meeting and to serve as the legislative body of the town of Hingham, that to me is an overall good. I'm sure we'll have conversations about whether it's better to have people rise and stand, because there will be that point of view. The notion that there might be is to me not likely. People stand up and be counted. Same stuff. Imagine if the Declaration of Independence had been signed by knock yourself. We're just all those in favor of succeeding in Great Britain. First one. Well, I guess we're in that. But it's I suppose the time has come. Communities are quite similar to ours, and there have been very few in talking to people or just following the discussions. And there is stuff when we get to this point. The Massachusetts Moderators Association has done a lot of grounds. Vendors, costs, who rents, who's able to, I need 300 more convention question. I need 300 more devices. And you can borrow them. Obviously, you have to borrow them a compatible system. There's some work for the IT people. We have to make sure the infrastructure that accommodates it. All these other towns can do it. We can certainly address any kind of implementation and operational issues. Thanks.
Thank you. Other comments or questions?
Can I make a motion?
Love you to make a motion.
I move that the town appropriate and transfer a sum of up to $100,000 from unassigned fund balance to be expended under the direction of the select board in consultation with the moderator to be used to pay for electronic voting devices and associated equipment for use for the 2027 town meeting.
Second.
Checking. Alan is online. Promote you to panelist, Alan. And we will go around the room. Elaine. Aye. Mary. Aye. Steve.
Aye.
Brian.
Aye.
Dave.
Aye.
Michael. Aye. Kevin.
Aye.
Ted.
Aye.
Brenda. Aye. Ben.
Aye.
Tina.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Jerry.
Aye.
Alan.
That's, I think it's panelists now.
Oh, sorry. Aye. There we go.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We are waiting for the folks from personnel board are next door talking to the select board. So we'll come back to the report of the personnel board and move on to Dave. You want to handle the library chiller?
Chiller. The chiller, Article Q. So, and we have, thank you, we have Linda here to also from HBL to field any questions that I can answer. But basically, thank you for everybody that made comments. I wanted especially thank Jerry for helping me with some of the syntax, the way the workflows go. That was crucial. So just to back up, basically the gist of this is the warrant article is asking the town to utilize approximately $1.81 million from unassigned fund balance to replace the chiller in the Hingham Public Library and 4 of the fan coil units, which are the air handlers that move the air. So as you know, the library was renovated in 2000. So most of the chilling system, including the chiller itself, is over 25 years old. It's broken down before, parts are no longer available. Replacement parts are certainly not available. They can be manufactured sometimes, or they can be rated from other machines. As you know, the library is a designated cooling center in the summer. So that's a critical function of the town. And also, it's important to note that every demographic in the town, young kids to our seniors, use the library on a daily basis. So it's important, obviously, that the HVAC system be brought up to date as the heating system was back 10 years ago. 10 years ago. The genesis of the project was library got an $80,000 grant from capital funding last year to do the engineering studies. Preliminary documents were drawn up. The final construction documents are still in the works. Then they'll go to the cost estimator. Let's see, mention. We seek to replace the chiller, which is 25 years old, and there are 4 FCUs, the fan control units. Those are basically in the ceiling, if you will, on the children's side, the old town hall side of the library. So it's the preliminary cost estimate is just under $1.3 million for the chiller and just over $500,000 for the FCUs. The condensers are not being replaced. Let's see. What else did I want to mention? It ties into the existing systems. That's not a problem. So final costs will be known once the project, once the final documents are in hand. System is fully electric. There are no gas emissions. It was asked at select board if the energy efficiencies gained were known, but they're not known this time. The library board of trustees voted unanimously to proceed. And does anyone have any questions?
Brandon?
This part of your system is electric, obviously your other heating system is not. And it will at some point also begin to deteriorate. Do you know what the life expectancy is for the 2016 heating system?
It is over 20 years. Off the top of my head, I'd have to look it up, but we're looking at a good, 10 to 15 years before we're looking at.
My only request of the board of trustees is to begin planning now for how to have that system become electric and non-emitting given our town's goals.
Absolutely, yes.
Too bad that the two can't come together, but they often don't come together.
Yeah, that wasn't even on our radar.
Thank you. Any other questions?
My only concern, it's not a concern. We obviously don't have the final cost estimates. So if we were to get them, obviously in the next days or weeks, then we just modify the text. What if we don't by the time the edits have to be in?
What are the chances? What is it? What's the over under?
Well, actually, the final docs have just been finished and sent to the cost estimator. We think we can turn it around within the next 2 weeks. Now, this is what he's telling me now.
Right.
But I heard from him yesterday because he knows this is on fire and I need the number like yesterday. So
Okay.
I hope to have it within a couple of weeks. When is if I can ask, when's the deadline that we need the final number by printing?
The 24th, the 19th preferably, but we do have the 24th, absolutely necessary.
Today's the 10th, that's 2 weeks.
Yeah, I would say 95% confident we will have it by then, and I will keep the fires burning.
Thank you.
Have we also used the up to language or?
We can, I just don't know if we have that number either, so,
Yeah.
I mean, let's see how we do between now and the 19th, and we can probably make that, call.
Okay,
Steve,
I don't have a substantive question. I have a question about whether we're ready to vote things that are coming out unassigned funds, even though not really had a full discussion of scope of what's coming out of unassigned funds.
That was my question too.
yeah, that's fine, that's where I said, if you had concerns while we handing that out, that's fine. You can work. Yes,
I had a quick question about background on this chiller. It was out of warranty, I'm assuming.
Oh, yes.
How old was it?
It was installed in 2000.
2000.
Yeah.
So it's a 26-year-old piece of equipment that was out of warranty, and I guess it kind of references what's partly a Steve phrase. If we had a more proactive capital budgeting strategy, this really would deserve to be a capital item, and it wouldn't be coming out of fund balance. And my observation is there's a lot of things coming out of fund balance that in different ways fit into that construct. And it's one thing if something that's well within its useful life fails, that's something unforeseen. It's an emergency, and that's one of the reasons you have a rainy day fund. But if you've got something that's 10 years out of warranty and fully expected that there's a failure, reasonable expected quite soon, I just think that should be budgeted for through the capital process and not from fund balance.
I would just make 2 points. If we tried to fund this through capital outlay, it would take 50% of the capital outlay budget, so.
No question.
Then you're stuck, but I'd also just point out that in our financial policy, among the acceptable uses of excess unassigned fund balance are capital items. Which this is certainly one of them. I feel more comfortable using excess unassigned fund balance for one-time capital events that don't create an ongoing liability. It just, I think as a town, if you're operating with $3.5 million in capital, these big things, whether it's a truck or a chiller, you're really not able to fund them through capital outlay. What I feel good about is that this went through the capital outlay process. It's been on the 5-year plan. It's been talked about. It has been vetted.
Just put a point on what I was saying. I'm not putting this on capital outlay, which I would rather limited budget, but it could have been a warrant article. It could have been a capital item of more traditional sense, either through capital outlay or through additional means that keeps it within the capital budgets for.
My hope would be going forward that regardless of the source of funding, this is a capital item. And we have this great capital outlay committee that does such a great job on all the capital. I think we're losing an opportunity if we don't route these things through capital outlay.
Is it on the fund balance use? Only because we're gonna have that discussion at, coming up.
More of, kind of sort of, but it's slightly philosophical. For such a large purchase for an item that has a life expectancy of 20 years, why are we funding it through borrowing? So I think that would be an appropriate way to look at it, rather than saying, spend the whole 1.8 million this year.
Okay, we talk about that when we get to the, how about that? All right, so we'll set this one aside and come back and vote it, vote when we have a number and we're ready to vote capital items. Fair enough? Ben, you are up with civil service.
I am.
Do you have a preference on which I pull up or?
Well, why don't we do, CC,
Okay.
which is fire.
You can start off with Lisa.
Okay. So you all got the draft. I got a little bit of feedback. And I have since spoken to Kevin, the labor attorney, Kevin Healy. We spoke on the phone and he gave it his blessing as well. I did get some interesting feedback from former or current ACON member Steve. He was able to find, and I'm gonna figure out your source. He was able to find the
Hand it to me. That's a great fun.
he was actually able to find the MOA. Do I have that right?
CD.
No, it's not in the
Yeah.
it's not in the CBA, so this is that memorandum of agreement where the parties will act in good faith should this pass town meeting. And there were a couple of things that Steve pointed out. So this one-time payment of $7,500 is actually split into two payments. And I'm not sure if that needs to be put into the comment. The total is the same, $7,500 per individual. But it's broken into two payments at two different points, depending on, I mean, it says here, the second payment is before the end of the calendar year in which the affirmative vote at town meeting is made. And then the first payment is made as soon as practicable after the affirmative vote. I don't know if that's necessary to put into the comment. The totals don't change. So I'll leave that to the committee to think about. It can go back to. It can go back to my desk and I can craft language and send it back out.
What's the opportunity for getting the actual numbers for this one too? Any
So,
update on that? I know they were still working on.
it's my understanding that we won't get that until after town meeting, but I will double check. I can double check with the chiefs
Okay.
and Tom. Right, that's one reason why we went with it not to exceed.
Right.
They're authorized up to 50 members for each, for fire.
And that's what I was just thinking, is that, and that's. Everybody's comfortable with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Other questions for Brownies? Yeah,
So up there, it looks like, I'm just looking, it says, once approved, the one-time payment of 7,500. I wonder whether, we should indicate the source of funding in the comment. And I'm sorry I didn't catch that until now, but just based on our conversations, should we indicate that that's coming from unassigned fund balance?
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially for a person 10 years from now that's gonna go back in
Yeah.
time to figure out where all
Yeah.
the money's going.
Yeah.
Which happened?
Yeah.
It helps the public understand what's happening.
Yeah.
No, that needs to be said, absolutely. Does the committee have an opinion on? The MO,
Yeah, so I think it's a good point. Because if it doesn't pass town meeting, the money will be in the fire. I mean, the police and firefighters will have earned the first part by doing their thing. They will have gotten the first payment, so that money's gone regardless of what town meeting votes.
no,
That's not.
no, only with an affirmative. Only an affirmative vote. Does the first payment of $37.50 get made as soon as practicable?
After the town meeting, and then when's the second payment?
Before the end of the calendar year. Of December.
I had it mixed up. Yeah.
Okay.
That's Doesn't seem to matter.
I
Just
just
the
think
sum
it's,
7,500.
I was just gonna say, I think when you're changing where it comes from, instead of one-time payment, I think if you just have the total, just in case, you know, we're not.
Yeah, I don't want
I think
to
that's
get
fine.
confusion, any more confusion. I didn't know. Okay.
We paid out of.
So this goes back to get edited and I'll send it out?
That'd be great.
All right, so that would be both of them. CC and ED.
Any other questions, comments? Most great, thank you, Ben. Gary.
This is, are you gonna put it up there?
Yep, I'll bring it right up.
We're next talking about Article MM, a citizen's petition to amend our existing noise bylaw. And we have, are we getting close?
I think that was
We
me.
have-
I'm sorry.
We have Hillary Tecco here, who I believe is the lead author of this. And I would like to just give a few brief comments about it. The select board has already heard this. And just to give a little background, this proposal is to amend the noise control bylaw, which is Article 42 of our general bylaws, to specifically address pickleball. The article would require sound level mitigation measures for any new pickleball courts that are not currently existing. Specifically, and Hillary, when you get up and do your thing, please correct anything that I say that's wrong. But I believe this is specifically would address the pickleball courts that town meeting approved last year in the Carlson Fields complex. So this article, if it were passed, would apply to that since it is not constructive. The article as written would require that pickleball noise be not plainly audible beyond 100 feet from the source. And that there's nothing that elaborates on that further regarding what would be within that 100 feet, whether it's undeveloped woods or residential properties or commercial properties. It's a strict 100-foot distance. And as Hillary and I were talking about this, it became a little unclear to me whether any outdoor pickleball court could in fact be built to achieve this standard, and perhaps Hillary can enlighten us if it's possible, but 100 feet is not very far, and I'm not sure what you could do to an outdoor court that would prevent plain audibility of noise coming from a pickleball court 100 feet away. So, you know, it's an interesting thing to think about as we're looking at this. What is the ultimate effect of this were it to pass? The noise bylaw is currently enforced by 3 entities in town: the Hingham Police Department, the Board of Health, and the Building Department. I did speak with Deputy Chief Petitti at the Police Department and with Sue at the Board of Health. They did not close the loop with Mike Clancy, but after Hillary gives her presentation, I'll debrief a little on what the Deputy Chief and Sue Sarney had to say. And again, finally, the select board voted no action on this. And after Hillary's presentation, I'll review a little bit their concerns that they expressed during the hearing, if you have not already seen it. So with that intro, Hillary Tecco, for the petitioners.
Thank you, Hillary. It's possible if we could keep it to about 5 minutes or so, 7 minutes.
I will try.
Okay, appreciate it.
I'll cut down. I did Hillary Tecco, 22 Hillside Terrace. And good evening. It's very nice to see you all. Thank you for your time. I know this is a ton of hard work. It's quite nice to sit here and listen to you guys discuss these articles and the thought that you guys put into this. So thank you for allowing me to be here. So to your point, I will try and keep this to 5 minutes. If any of you did see the select board, and thank you, Jerry. Jerry and I got a good laugh at my demonstration film with the select board, and I hope you all did too, because I practiced that beforehand.
She's really good at keeping it in the air.
And I had many people listening to make sure that you could hear it. And so when you couldn't hear it, it was worth a good chuckle. So I hope you enjoyed that. With that said, before I came here with the demonstration, before I came here at 4:56 today, I recorded what I hear in my neighborhood and what pretty much around Bear Cove Park, what you hear. So. An accident venue. You don't hear that. Pretty quiet. Right around 5 o'clock when everybody's getting out of work, trains nearby. I can definitely hear that when it goes by, but it's pretty quiet. So. To compare, this is Smoking Aces USA Pickleball Approved paddle, along with the ball. And I'll limit it. I'm gonna play what I had, and I'm gonna play the pickleball. And hopefully I'll keep it up in the air for you guys. I'm like $50 an hour for this, so. Oh.
Much did you pay her for that?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Was that distracting? Was that distracting?
Was that the $50 that you just paid?
$50 I just.
And well done.
And so my final trick.
If it's quiet, please.
To compare the noises to another racket sport. And I will play again. But I have.
Well done.
So I think we can all agree. Pickleball is significantly louder. Next door can agree as well. And it is distracting. It's sharper than tennis and a frequency that grabs your attention. Multiply that by 9, 12 hours a day. Article 42, noise control. It is the policy of the town of Hingham to prevent excessive sound, which may jeopardize the health, welfare, or safety of its residents, or adversely impact their quality of life. The World Health Organization published excessive noise harms human health and interferes with people's daily activities at school, at work, at home, and during leisure time. It is no secret that many communities have been torn apart and involved with multiple lawsuits over the noise pickleball generates in residential neighborhoods. Cities across the country are banning pickleball. Latest was Carmel, California. Courts have been closed due to noise in Boise, Idaho, Lakewood, Colorado, Denver, Colorado, Farragut, Tennessee, Clifton, Virginia, Newport, Rhode Island, Sarasota, Florida, Falmouth, Mass, Wellesley, Mass, and Chilmark's Planning Board is looking to banish the sport of plastic popping sounds from the town on the vineyard. Canton, Mass took pickleball off the town meeting agenda last year due to noise concerns next to conservation land. Currently, the only conclusion and guarantee the town of Hingham has regarding pickleball noise from the Centec sound study stating all receptors, whether 50 or 1,200 feet away from the courts, will hear that sound the pickleball makes outside of our properties. To avoid this noise, the study tells us to go inside and close our windows. We're in closed windows right now. And they came to ask us to be quiet. I have been following the pickleball progression since January 2025 and listening to each town committee tell me that noise will not be an issue. I'm told there are many more steps to take and they probably won't get 9 courts. Noise is not in their scope, and I pass on to the next committee, promised that is the committee that's going to handle it. You guys know how wrong I want to be about pickleball? I welcome the idea that I am and would happily throw a pickleball party for all involved to be proven wrong about this. And I want to take a moment to apologize if I may come across as a little bit worked up. I'm trying not to be, but listening to this noise has heightened my fight or flight reaction. And I fight. The Rec Commission continues to work hard for the pickleball courts, but diminishes the neighbors' concern of excess noise that will harm the health and well-being of all neighbors of the courts. Neighbors that include the town workers of the DPW and the lighting plant. Anyone watching or participating in a sport on Carlson Fields or any Hingham resident trying to enjoy a quiet walk through Bear Cove Park. It really came to my surprise to learn the noise, that noise is not the planning board's purview and does not review projects against the noise bylaw. This begs the question, who in the town reviews the noise impact of new projects in respect to the Hingham noise bylaw? The answer, as of now, is no one. The select board did mention special permits and zoning for the 9 proposed courts. The whole point of this proposed amendment is to specifically refer to pickleball noise as subject to the standards of noise pollution that we've put in our noise bylaw and hold the town accountable to properly installing pickleball courts that will not harm the greater Hingham community. Thank you.
Jerry?
Would you like me to debrief a tiny bit and then open it up for questions?
Yes, please.
So, the concerns that were expressed to some degree in the select board hearing and in my own thinking about this are a few. I think number one, the standards in both the original Article 42 and in the proposed article are not very well defined. We have statements like plainly audible. We have statements like reasonable persons of normal sensitivities. And usually in my world, and I think in the world of good regulation, we'd like to have more objective metrics. A lot of noise control metrics or provisions are described in terms of measurable things like decibel level. So feel that without these more objective metrics, it becomes difficult to enforce both our current bylaw and this. In terms of the noise generator, I think sometimes in talking to the deputy chief, one of the easier things to enforce is time limits. So while the police department or the board of health or the building department may not understand reasonable people with normal sensitivities, it's easy to say, well, it's before 7 a.m. or it's after 7 p.m. And So that's easier to enforce than these other kind of more nebulous things. Another concern that I have is the 100-foot distance to anything. To me, there are places where 100 feet is meaningful, and there are other places where it's not meaningful. In Norwood Industrial Park, for example, the 100 feet is that meaningful. Whereas if you're next to Hillary's house, clearly it's going to be meaningful. So again, to me, it's a little bit broad brush. And also again, yeah, I feel like it's a little broad brush. Everybody, the two that I spoke with and in the select board's hearing, one of the primary issues that came up was the difficulty of enforcing both the original and this proposed noise bylaw. Again, unless it's time of day sort of thing. So for example, Sarni said, well, a lot of the noise complaints that come up happen on nights and weekends. And that means that the Board of Health and the building department, they're not in the office. So it's impossible for them to undertake their enforcement responsibilities in times of day when some of these kinds of noise generation activities are likely to occur. And it devolves to the police department, and the deputy chief said, for better or worse, really hard for him to justify assigning uniformed officers to go and respond to what some might think is a kind of benign recreational activity. Again, this whole enforcement issue becomes complicated in a practical world. I guess that's really kind of it. Again, select board did vote no action. There are many noise bylaws out in the world that are far more complex than what Hillary is proposing, but that do address some of these issues in terms of more objective standards, or to which you measure the noise activity, and kind of more enforceable approaches to it, like perhaps limiting times of day and that sort of thing. So I think there are other ways to do such a thing that might address some of these concerns. But at this point, I think that the proposal, from my opinion anyway, is not quite ready for time. So that's my thought, and please everybody weigh in.
Steve?
I have a couple things to say. I understand it's close to home, petitioner, no pun intended, and I understand that. But it seems to me a little bit, I'm not sure what the right word is, odd, awkward, a bylaw change be proposed by a citizen, as opposed to having, the people that work for the town, people that are voted into the select board positions to tackle that instead. That's number one. Number two, sound was a big topic last year, no doubt. Everybody that addressed that article, here at AdCom, elsewhere, and at town meeting, I was assigned to be the writer of that article for AdCom. And where that comment and recommended motion landed, specifically on sound mitigation, as it was such a topic, was that wouldn't be left in the abyss, but it would be left for the select board to make final decisions on that. So that to me is the, again, no pun intended, sounding board for this topic. And three, and I think I might have told people that weren't on AdCom last year, those of you that weren't on AdCom, I'll tell you now that, one of the things I did, it's imperfect, just like your demonstration is imperfect because it's right on top of us. And I'm sure what I did was imperfect. I went to the end of your street, stood there in the daylight when it was quiet, and somebody went down to the location and did what you just did, up and down, actually worse than that, whacking back and forth with somebody else. And while my wife might say my hearing is terrible, I heard absolutely nothing. I went to 2 or 3 different locations that were raised by the residents. And the only thing I would say is what Jerry just said. 100 feet just seems completely arbitrary and short for that kind of proposal. What are my comments?
Yep.
So in regards, so thank you. I also did the same thing and sat on my front porch and had someone go down to the site and whack balls, and I heard every single one. So I did the same thing. So it is one of those things, it's a who it affects. And so just because I have better hearing doesn't mean that I should have to, or anybody in Hingham using that space or 100 feet, more than 100 feet away, should have to be subject to that type of noise. And then just on the 15-foot fence, on the 15-foot fence about the select board in regards to the soundproofing, I specifically asked CHA who is building, or they're the engineers, so apologies. I asked CHA, the rec department has hired about the 15-foot soundproofing fence. And of all the accolades that they gave this man, he talked about all the pickleball courts that he built. I asked about the soundproofing for the fencing, and he said that they would do it. And I asked him what kind it would be, and he told me what kind it was, which I don't know. And I asked if it had been done before, and in Massachusetts, and he said, no, it hadn't, and he does not know if it works. And so that's the problem, is that the soundproofing is no guarantee. And also in the Ascentech sound study, it tells us that soundproofing doesn't really mitigate or work.
Okay, Brian? Thank you.
I do think the town has a duty to not allow a disturbance of the peace. I think they strive to do that pretty rigorously. And different places have different levels of ambient noise. I mean, you know, where I live, it's primarily the traffic going up Main Street. In another part of town, it might be you won't even hear that much, but when you're talking about playing fields, there's all manner of ambient noise and it's higher than in other places, because you're hearing parents cheering at baseball games. You might be hearing basketball being dribbled from one end of the court to the other, which is a much heavier item. I played a lot of basketball, it makes a lot of noise. And I think the town tries to limit this by putting hours on it, to put some parameters on it. But I think folks who move adjacent to an athletic playing field, with all of the obligations of the town that I just cited, to not make it an unpleasant place to live, you're accepting a certain level of noise that comes with the playing field, and the ambient noise would be expected to be higher. And so, in my view, if they're taking pretty means to limit the hours, such, they're probably doing the best they can, because they can't have monitors that send the police car on Sunday morning. It's just not feasible. And it is, after all, a big set of playing fields in an athletic complex.
If I could, I think those are, what's interesting about this to me is that we're kind of talking about two things. We're talking about the pickleball courts that were approved by town last year, for much discussion. We're also talking about a change to a bylaw. And the change to the bylaw kind of goes far beyond what happened last year. And to me, if this is a way to somehow kind of get back into the discussion of last year's vote, that's fine. That should happen in town meeting. But I think for our purposes, I'd like to just focus on the words of the Bible, because that's what we're talking about. And whether it has the effect desired or otherwise to kind of put a stop or a temporary halt to the project that was approved last year is a different thing. But I do think I'd like us to really focus on the actual proposed bylaw change per se, regardless of whether it's going to have an impact on what was approved last year or not.
Tina? This is out and outside of that
Probably is.
We have, pickleball courts at the rec. Not dedicated, but we have tennis courts and we have courts used at PRS. And I wanted to know, have any of the neighbors surrounding those courts joined you in this? Are there multiple complaints from neighbors near the courts at Plymouth River or the courts at Town Hall? And did they have these same concerns? And are they in support of this bylaw?
So excellent question. I've spoken to many people around the pickleball courts that are used over here. Every time, because this gets into, every time I've gone down on Saturdays and Sundays with my kids, I've never seen pickleball players in the morning and in the afternoon, and on Saturdays I'm going twice a day. So that's kind of funny because I find them phantom, but I do know that there was an official complaint, apparently that there were multiple complaints having spoken to folks on Garrison, folks on Burr, folks on the end of Thompson, there's Captain Thompson and there's Thompson, folks at the end of Thompson. So yes, they can definitely hear it. And we have in Conservatory Park, we have somebody that lived down on Thompson Road and moved. And of subject, but of hearing it, they're not dedicated, so you're not playing it all the time. It's not this constant noise. And from the complaints that I heard is that it was happening before 8 o'clock in the morning. And Garrison Burr, I don't know what the other road is over there. They did send, I had the email that they did send a formal complaint about the noise, and from what I understand. So the question
Before
is
8 a.m.
resolved. I'm sorry.
Before 8 a.m.
Before 8 a.m. That was what they asked, and they said, yeah, well, Breck said that we can only play pickleball after 8 a.m.
One of the reasons I wonder is because the pickleball courts by PRS are used quite a bit.
My children go there.
And I have wondered if the school has had any issues with that.
So there's been an issue on High Street. He's on Village 205, and I just don't want to speak about somebody, but even though I just gave the address. They're about 500 feet away. And they are, so for PRS courts, there's a big White House on the right on High Street. And then the courts are 500 feet from the courts. I've spoken to this man. He said that it is torture from April until fall, and he cannot enjoy his backyard. In addition to that, I think on the other side, is that Mill Road on the other side of PRS, like beyond the woods? If you were to do like a straight line. There's another house, also spoke with them. They're 1,700 feet away, and they can hear it like it's in their backyard. Due to the elevation. So it's, yes, and why hasn't the town heard more complaints? Because pickleball courts went up and they don't think anybody's gonna do anything about it. So if it's in the town noise bylaw, perhaps action can be taken.
Okay.
And then the Burr, like, neighbors have gone to Burr and they've heard the pickleball and it was like, it's a racket.
Jerry, do you have what you need? Is there any other comments or any questions? Elaine?
As bylaws go, is it, common that a very specific kind of noise is enumerated as opposed to a decibel level?
I don't know the answer. I've not studied noise control bylaw.
Well, I didn't know if, it seems so specific. I mean, I understand pickleball has good kind of noise, but that a bylaw do that and,
I think to me it's unusual because, again, obviously different kinds of noises have different qualities. And they love the noise of children yelling and screaming while they're, riding on the swing set. And that could be louder than pickleball noise, but not annoying because they love kids. So I don't know, it's all potentially quite subjective. But I think more often than not, good bylaws try to quantify things and not rely on standards of reasonable people with normal sensitivities because it's hard to define them. So, and then, someone could challenge something like that. It's hard to challenge a decibel meter. It's easy to say, I don't think that person has normal sensitivities. So again, to me, it's one should strive for more quantification and or hours of limitation, things that are kind of easier to measure. And that's why I find this the proposal just a little not ready for prime time.
Okay. Thank you.
Great,
Thank you for coming.
Thank you, and I apologize, I wasn't sure if I was supposed to stand or.
No, you did great. You did great. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Steve, I see, the from the planning board the personnel board has joined us. Would you like to, can we go back and cover that one?
Sure.
Thank you.
Do we want to vote on this?
I think without a comment, I think we need to comment. I appreciate, we know, that you've said the recommendation, but I think we should wait to get a comment. I put it on. It's on. I'm sorry.
Hillary, there will be another meeting at which we will vote.
Okay.
So you get to come back.
All right.
But you don't have to bring your props.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bring the tangerines, I feel like that's popular.
Bring the $50.
Yeah.
I will. 1 second, I just wanna let Hillary know, so. It's on for the 18th. So go ahead.
So can a recommended motion materially change the original article? I mean, how?
It has to be within the scope.
Okay.
So, I'm gonna say, yes, it can change it. Materially feels like we're now edging out of the scope, so it would have to probably get some assistance on that determination of whether it's in or out. So.
Okay.
Okay.
Guys,
Please.
okay, so I'm doing Article D. I sent a comment around. We have some of our esteemed representatives and personnel board to save me when I get this wrong, but Article D is an annual article. And it does a number of things. This year we're proposing to do essentially 3 things. Number 1, to accept I said planning board. I mean to say personnel board. Accept the personnel board's report. Oddly, I find we summarize it, even though it's in the warrant, so I'm not sure why we summarize it, but I summarize it. The next thing it does is it appropriates the estimated cost, the Article 4 number, the estimated cost of the not yet provided employee compensation benefits. Remember last year, that number was about $1.7 million, just because they were planning in advance for what the outcome of police and fire collective bargaining agreements was going to be. We don't have any major ones like that this year. So the number is $346,000, and that's essentially a little bit more, essentially the 3% typical increase not yet provided for non-union employees. There's a couple of smaller contingency items in there. And the third thing that we're doing this year, we did last year too, is to vote to recommend approval of a proposed personnel committee bylaw amendment that is also laid out in the report of the personnel board. And that's essentially doing 2 things. One is it's putting in writing a practice that the personnel board has been executing on anyway, and that is to give length of service credit for employees that leave employ of the town, come back within 2 years. They get service credit for vacation and for sick pay and for longevity. And it also clarifies that if you left the light plant and within 2 years you come back to town hall, you fit in as a coming back employee, even though it's from a quote unquote affiliate. And the other thing it's doing is just clarifying the exit interview process. It's ensuring in writing that the exit interview process is outside the chain of command and grants department heads and those people that are subject to their own employment contract the right, if they choose, to have their exit interview with a member of the personnel board. Look at this.
Well done.
Look at that. So, questions, comments? I think that my esteemed editor is going to make sure to have appropriate references to the civil service articles, because I didn't include them, and I probably should have. Other than that, I wasn't myself planning to make any substantive changes. But I'm open to them. If people have comments, questions, concerns.
Brenda?
This may be not in my not understanding something, but note that the withdrawal from civil service and corresponding one-time payment described above are contingent upon approval by town meeting and a corresponding CBA approved by the town and union. Are we talking about a new CBA? Or are we talking about the CBA that's already in essence been approved? And this is the second piece, which is town meeting authorizing exit from civil
I'm
service.
going to
And
turn my
payment.
head this way and hopefully they heard you and it'll answer you. If they know.
Karen Johnson, 16 Mercury Circle from the Personnel Board. It's a new CBA. It's a really good question. So, the protections of civil service are codified in state law, and the exercise that we will undertake, like many other communities who have left civil service, is to essentially take this in state law and bring those into a contractually binding agreement between the town and the employees. So promotion, discipline, and hiring. Importantly, and things Steve pointed out, civil service continues to apply to anybody employed in a bargaining unit as of the time the new contract was ratified. It only be from hires in the bargaining unit after the CBA, after town meeting, and after the CBA. So it's a forward-looking CBA. But we have, I will say we have a template, the town of Walpole, Karen, our labor council, Kevin Feely, who's probably heard of or met before, has drafted that language. It's in front of the representatives. So I think it is, it's a win, not an effort.
So just to check, the contracts that were settled last year don't apply, so that the payment, anyway, so the payment wouldn't happen this year then, because the new CBA won't happen with these two unions this year, right?
Yes, it will. So this will be a specially negotiated.
Okay, so to accomplish this piece.
Exactly right. So the CBA from this last negotiation that was settled that Steve reported on in the comments includes a provision that said, we promise that we'll talk to you about exiting civil service. And we understand that part of that process is us agreeing and town meeting approving with the town meeting. So you're right, it's an off-cycle negotiation.
That's the part that wasn't there. Okay, got it. Thank you.
Thank you. City for the bell.
And
Am I allowed to move?
I'm
Okay.
I'm giving you the eyes, please.
Okay, so I would like to make a motion to approve this proposed article in the fashion distributed that does three things. It approves the planning board, the personnel board report. It approves the proposed bylaw change for the personnel committee, and it appropriates $346,129 for the not yet provided but expected to be provided expenses for compensation benefits in fiscal year 2027.
Second. We come to vote. Any further comments? Elaine,
I,
Mary, Steve,
Aye.
Brian,
Aye.
Dave,
Aye.
Michael. What's your face? Just had to do it. Sorry. Oh, Kevin. I had to do it. Sorry,
Aye.
Kevin. Ted.
Aye.
Brenda. Aye. Ben.
Aye.
Tina. Aye. John.
Aye.
Barry.
Aye.
Alan.
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Karen. Thank you. So we are, not gonna do citizens petition tonight, the, comments in process, but not out yet. Brian, are we going to, do the, S at the next meeting as well, right? Is that, I understand that?
As of 1 or 2 o'clock today, the number seems to be less than certain.
In plus. Okay, so we're going to wait and do S. Both of those will be on the 18th. Yep, both of those are on the 18th. Bringing us to the, real estate transfer fee. Ed, anything in particular you want me to bring up?
I mean, it's my view that this is gonna require some discussion. I won't read the whole article, which I sent out earlier. But the gist of it is that the town is looking for alternative ways to create revenue outside of our property tax, for example. And we got into some pretty good detail, I think, as far as, you know, and everybody here is familiar with the 5-year forecast and everything else, but essentially, if real estate is sold, whether it's residential or commercial or land, there could be a real estate transfer fee imposed. There would be the responsibility of the buyer of the property. And the fee would be equal to 1% of the purchase price. Although an exemption equal to 80% of the median assessed property value would apply. So when version of this article was brought, although it wasn't heard at town meeting, it never made it that far. It was Article GG, the video I sent out. They had certain exclusions that are not in this one, but are kind of implied. Like the old article had an exemption for first-time homebuyers, for example. This article does not, but I think the idea is that, you know, the median home value, if you're buying a starter home, whatever that means in this town, or like, for example, a condo, maybe you wouldn't owe anything as far as this real estate transfer fee. It would really be applicable to those higher end properties as far as that goes. Other towns have brought this forward. It is a home rule petition, technically. So essentially, Hingham is requesting that the state legislature grant Hingham specifically, in this case, approval to do this. And much like the ADUs that were discussed not too long ago, even if Hingham were to bring home rule petition and the legislature says, yes, we'll allow you to do this, they could then pass different legislation that says, well, this is the way everybody's going to do it. And then that would force Hingham, which happened, to go back again and kind of amend it to say, okay, well, the state just required us to do this, but now we're going to add these other further requirements. So whatever, if this article goes to town meeting or gets approved, it would still have to go before the Massachusetts legislature. I believe there's like a good 9 towns now that are pending this type of legislation already, and some of them have been waiting several years to even be heard on it. Nantucket, I believe, has a version of this, but it's different in the sense that it's more of a land trust. And most of these articles that I've seen, or all of them, really the gist of it is the main benefit is designed to increase affordable housing within those towns and communities. Some towns have petitioned for tweaks to that, where maybe only a portion goes to affordable housing. and then the rest can be used for other purposes. Like Provincetown recently put forward a petition, and I believe it was 50-50. So 50% went to affordable housing, 50% went to their general fund. Which brings me to another point. So Hingham would be unique in the way that this article was written, or what the petition would be, in the sense that Hingham is basically saying, all right, we will use the money toward affordable housing if we don't meet the 40B requirement. And if we're already meeting the 40B requirement in town, we're not going to put any of the money toward affordable housing. Instead, that would go to the general fund of the town, where it can be used for any legal purpose. And in my commentary that I want to discuss tonight too was the select board. Well, first of all, the select board, it was not unanimous. It was 2-1 in favor of. But one of the thoughts I had that I wanted to discuss was perhaps instead of the way it's written, the advisory committee could instead recommend something along the lines of, all right, maybe a specific portion goes to affordable housing, because that seems to be a requirement for the home rule petition anyway. But maybe a portion, instead of going to the general fund, we could specify, hey, this should go to a tax stabilization fund, or for capital, like we were kind of talking about earlier tonight. And my thought as far as some of this fee money, if it's not used for affordable housing, going to a capital stabilization fund or tax stabilization fund, would be that the people that are paying this fee to live in this town, at least they would benefit from that, because it would help keep their taxes down. Versus if it goes to the general fund, yeah, maybe it helps them, but maybe it doesn't. Maybe that money is used to build pickleball courts and they don't play pickleball, just to bring that home. And then again, from a capital standpoint, whether it's building a new HCAL and it's a building, and it would be nice to have like a fund, if it's not funded via their programming, to pay for future building repairs that are going to be needed, and whether it's a proposed HCAL or a school, for example, or even we just need a new semi truck to haul recycling down to CMAS or something like that, to have some of that money diverted to a purpose like that, where again, whomever is paying this fee could, by my mind, implicitly benefit from that as a citizen of the town, because they're getting the services that way. And I like the idea of that more so than just kind of going into the general fund, where it could be used for literally any legal purpose. So I was just curious as to what everybody thought about that as well.
Right.
Okay. There are 4 reasons why I think at a practical level, this is going to be a non-starter. Okay. The first item is that what's being discussed on the Beacon Hill at great length is specifically a real estate tax that supports the development of new affordable housing and the infrastructure costs that come with affordable housing, sewer, water, such. There's no room in what's being debated for applying those funds to general operating budgets. Now, the second thing is the Nantucket tax. The legislature 45 years ago or so took up the specific question, can you do a real estate tax to support the preservation of land? And the legislature at that time made a decision on behalf of all 351 cities and towns that that was a permissible thing to do. So we hear references to Nantucket and 40 million being raised in Nantucket. Those funds went to keeping the land on Nantucket open. The fifth thing is in the future. So what's been held out is, well, we passed the requirement for 40B, so we have adequate affordable housing presently. But as we have seen at ACCOM, at the behest of the state, they have moved well beyond 40B as being the benchmark for whether there is enough affordable housing. That is why a couple of years ago, we had to take up the issue of by right ADUs. And the town was compelled at the pains of losing state funding to allow by right ADUs, which some of us were not particular fans of at the time, but it became state law. And the reason it did was the state felt that it could not accomplish the goals of production of affordable housing. And then a year later, they went a step beyond that and they got the MBTA Communities Act. So the 40B is no longer anybody's reference point for, in view of the state at least, what constitutes an acceptable affordable housing stock. So I don't think that will work. And fourthly, I'm not a politician, but I mean, there are political issues, many of them here. There's only a small number of towns that have the housing stock that's so expensive to be able to do a tax of this type, even if it were allowed. And it's going to be deemed as inequitable because most Massachusetts cities and towns don't have the luxury of two homes. Yeah. Beyond that, there's only about 20 Massachusetts cities and towns that can get an override to supplement their operating budget. And those guys are in a real straitjacket. So I think this is going to be judged as being something that's politically inexpedient and inequitable. And if the first three things aren't enough to scotch this, I think the fourth thing, the political thing, is going to stop it cold in its tracks. And so I don't think, I mean, I understand why, if it were plausible, this would be a nice solution. We're going to talk about some of the budget challenges in a few minutes. But I don't think at a practical level, the prognosis for this exists.
You connect with Joe?
Not yet, I reached out, but I didn't talk to him.
No, that's fine, just because I think that would be enlightening to that, but it's fine. It's okay.
I'm trying to talk with Joe and Machine, just saying, maybe get some insight into that.
Yeah, because I do know Bill talked to Joan and Patrick, and neither of them discouraged it for that reason of going forward. To say our legislators did not discourage going forward, they encouraged going forward. Well, to say I'm not making an opinion, I'm just making a factual statement. I know Ted is gonna.
Just making some practical observations.
Not disagreeing, just.
You know, remember Joan is our legislator, so it's kind of hard to say.
I'm just telling you. That's
You can run it up the
factual
flagpole,
Yep.
sure, and that's what will happen.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah.
Michael?
Thank you. First of all, Ted, thank you for circulating all that informative information. There was a lot of good material there, and that was great, really great. I'd like to pick up on Brian's comments though. We hear a lot in this group about affordability, and I hear about that in the community. And I hear people express concerns about their kids, being able to move back home and, young people moving in and the whole thing, right? Affordability is an issue. It's counterintuitive to me that a tax on buyers will help to achieve that. Although I appreciate the way this thing is structured to try to create this like 80% median thing and excludes this and this, I can see that it is potentially designed to try to allow that bridge that affordability problem while putting the burden on the higher cost property transfers. But suffice to say, I'm a little skeptical on that. More to the point, I'm not sure that it's, I personally would like to see more information about whether this is going to achieve its intended objective. I did a super unscientific sampling off of the assessor's data. And the town has a lot of properties, or a good number of properties owned by trusts. I don't know the answer to the question whether the group of properties owned by trusts tend to be higher value properties. I also don't know from this proposal whether transfers by a trust from, change the beneficial owners would be captured by this transfer tax. If there's a concentration of higher value properties held by trusts and they're not covered, then the projections of we're going to make all this money, even if you could apply it to general obligations, and I think that may not even be achieving the intended purpose here. So I think there's potentially some additional information that needs to be dug into, before this is sort of ready for our time.
Aaron?
I actually, just to try to organize my thoughts, I put something together, I'm gonna read it mostly so that I'm considerate of the committee's time. I appreciate the effort to identify new sources of revenue, and Ted, thank you for the information and the explanation. Combined, they raise important questions about how we as a town grapple with increased demand for services, capital needs, and inflationary pressure, especially within the constraints of Proposition 2.5, limited opportunities for commercial development, and the growing burden placed on residents to fund these needs through overrides and fees. The financial pressures we face are real, but urgency should not come at the expense of thoughtful analysis, due diligence, and public engagement. This article asks the town to give the select board authority to petition the state legislature on its behalf, which means that town meeting is the only opportunity that citizens will have to weigh in on both the idea and the particulars of this proposal. From my experience, when the town petitions the legislature, we are effectively saying that Hingham wants to implement this policy as written. And we're asking our state reps to dedicate time and effort to help carry it across the finish line. That's always significant, but I think, as Ted pointed out, it's especially important because our proposal is differing from the other, I think you said 13 that are currently awaiting legislative action. And I point out that if down the road we wanted to change our proposal, we would have to go through this whole process again. We'd have to go back to town meeting. We'd have to go back to the legislature. I think when we bring something to town meeting, our residents expect that we've studied it, we've socialized it, we've refined it. I think the same is true for special legislation. And I just don't think with this proposal, we're able to say that yet. Revisiting earlier ideas can be productive, and I was interested in watching last night. I watched the video from 2022, and there was a lot of discussion about the need for additional analysis, community engagement, that the proposal at that time wasn't kind of ready for town meeting consideration. And I was really struggling to ask myself what sort of due diligence has taken place between then and now that says that this is ready. And I would hate for a good idea to go to town meeting and get voted down because we haven't done the due diligence to give it its best chance at succeeding at town meeting. And I just kind of wonder if we're there because, Ted points out the proposal from the select board and the way the funds could be used. I think your point about maybe there's a different way to do that makes a lot of sense. I'm a little uncomfortable on March 10th with, a room like this kind of making an adjustment to a policy. I wonder about things like, how will this affect, will people maybe not look at Hingham and go to other communities because we don't have it? How might it affect the commercial base? Would it affect home prices? Would the realtors, and again, we haven't talked to the realtors, would the realtors say, in order for you to sell your house in Hingham, you're gonna have to lower your price a little bit to make up for this fee? I just don't think we know, and that's where I feel like broader discussion would help us figure out what is the right solution for Hingham. If there are unintended consequences that we haven't considered, it gives us a window to shape it. And that just kind of feels important because nobody else has done this before. So we can't look to another town and say, well, they did it this way. So I like this concept. I like the idea of looking for revenue opportunities. But I think we have a responsibility to put things forward to the town when they've had the necessary vetting. And I similar to 4 years ago, I don't think we're there right now. I would love to see us sitting here a year from now with a body of work that might help us, help us figure out how to put this forward.
First. I'm not gonna, Mary said much of what I would have said in a much less comprehensive way. But when something like this comes before us, to my mind, the proponent, which is the select board, should be providing us, or we should be able to get it from their designees, the analysis they did to bring this forward. And while people might think of 1% as chump change, and maybe it is in the big picture, just budget dust, especially if it were to go to something like affordable housing. But it's not unusual for a $2 million house to go. People are already fretting about their 5 to 6% brokerage fee, which is 100 grand, 120 grand. 1% on top of that is another 20 in the mix, and it doesn't really matter if it's on the buyer or seller. It's all part of the mix. So I'd like to know what they did on that front, if anything. And more importantly, two more important to me is, while the legislator or our legislator might have said X, I really wonder what our own council is telling us. If we've asked them, what's the likelihood that the state is going to do for us what they really have never done almost for anybody else? And something like this going to town meeting on a 2-to-1 vote at the select board level, this doesn't feel good. And I'd be curious, sorry, I didn't get to listen to that. What were the gist of the objections of the dissenting voter?
I mean, so Julie was the dissenting vote. I think part of it was exactly what, Mary was alluding to, or it's just, there was not enough research done between the last time this article came up and now. And that was the main point. I'll leave it at that.
Okay, no, we have Jerry was next and then I think it's Elaine and Brenda.
So I appreciate all the previous comments. I hope I won't repeat them too much. But I likewise have a number of concerns about this. And I'll take the proposal at face value and not try to think what could be a little better here, change this, tweak that. First of all, I find it very muddled. It can't decide, is it a proposed by law to support affordable housing, or is it a revenue generating proposal? I can't stand rules like that. And in practice, and of course, as somebody mentioned, Julie pointed out the other night at the select board that all the other proposals for this type of bylaw are strictly dedicated to affordable housing. So that's fine, at least they're upfront. In this case, it's kind of one or the other or both or something. And as I think somebody mentioned, maybe it was Brian, we can't trust the state to not move the goalposts on us. So while today we are ahead of the game in terms of 40B and we've met all of our obligations, next year they could totally change the rules, and what looked like it was going to be a revenue generating proposal that was sold as a revenue generating proposal all of a sudden is another affordable housing fund. Second of all, and I think very importantly, this adds cost to both moving to and living in Hingham. The supporters say that this tax, which is what it is to be paid by the buyers, but that's naive. The price is the price, and if the buyer comes along and says, all I can pay is X number of dollars, you got to give me a discount so that I can take care of this. And I think the rationale for describing it as a tax paid by the buyers is because on the face of it, it looks like you're not penalizing current Hingham residents. And that's exactly the opposite of what's going to happen. Current Hingham residents will absorb most, if not all, of this added cost. I think that, let's see, there are ripple effects. We've heard from Katie Roberts the other night that as housing becomes more expensive in Hingham, people may be less likely to send their kids to private school, and they may be more likely to send their kids to Hingham public school. I think that's a great thing, but there are so many ripple effects that we can't even begin to imagine. That's just one that, as time goes on, could put a further burden on our school enrollment. I think, we talked to, everybody talks about, oh, my kids can't afford to move to Hingham. Well, why are we continuing to come up with new ways to make it more expensive to live in Hingham? I think a big concern I have is economic development. We want to look for more ways to raise revenue that does not depend on residential property owners, because that's our base. And, one tried and true way is economic development for commercial property. If we all know Hingham is hard enough to develop in. And if we now add yet another dollar cost to this, why are we doing that? It's so counterproductive. We should be doing everything we can to encourage people to do good commercial development to broaden our tax base. Finally, and this is a little counterintuitive, but I think as written, it's inequitable in another way. In that if this were to pass, by excluding half of the sales, say, and that's not what it's going to be, but something below the median to pay taxes on, you're putting this sales tax or wealth tax burden on a distinct group of people in town. And I find that kind of obnoxious. I think it leads to resentment. It can lead to divisiveness. If we're going to do this, you shouldn't have any exceptions. It should be everybody, just like property taxes. So I think this is flawed in so many ways that I probably won't support.
Brian, we got a couple more people that talk to. Elaine, thank you.
I listened to the select board meeting and I thought Julie's major concern was that it wasn't going to be dedicated to affordable housing. She philosophically felt that was the chief aim of this legislation. I think we will be such outliers by having this different aim for the money. I'm not confident we would succeed with the legislation, but it's extraordinary that we're one. Usually we want to be in the middle of the pack, but in this case, we're going to be the one. So that concerns me. On the other hand, like Mary, I'm addicted to South Shore News. And every day there are, 6 towns with horrific stories. Fortunately, we're not one of them. In fact, we're the happy news lately, with the stories. But this was a recommendation of the Sustainable Budget Task Force. And I thought, I either read or heard that they had investigated this. So I'm wondering, where is the data from that investigation, since it was such a comprehensive study? I would like to, I don't know if you have pieces of that or what they're thinking is. But...
Yeah, basically that little, I think I included it as one of the attachments, which was just kind of like the proposal of like the Sustainable Budget Task Force, and it was discussed, and Brian, you can chime in too in case I missed anything, but there wasn't much proposed in the way of research. What they did show was, like, for example, sales numbers and the amount of money it could generate. But it wasn't a discussion as robust as this.
And there was no distinction between affordable housing versus general.
Can I just jump in? One thing is only Elaine is the last report that was in was 2022. And as a practical matter, it has not reconvened. So that's right. There was one meeting that discussed this as part of a few things, but the group has not reconvened. So there has not been in that time period. Check, but I don't believe there's been any robust work by the Sustainable Budget Task Force in that interim period. It's a double check, but it would, none was brought forward that said that.
It's accurate to my recollection. Do you remember them talking about anything beyond that?
No, they basically gave a list of potential sources of revenue from asset sales were a big part of it. And this broad concept of a real estate tax, and there was no.
And the ones that were dated were crossed off. Yeah, like a marijuana dispensary, for example.
Watch out one way.
Yeah, that's God said.
Are you all set, Brenda? Brenda, listen to me. Elaine, okay. Brenda, I think you have.
I mean, two things. I think in general, the idea makes sense to continue to look at, because bringing in sources of revenue is gonna be smart for the town no matter what. I think, to Jerry's point, costs in the town are gonna continue to go up, so affordability is gonna be a problem. However it is we try to pay for the things that are gonna cost more. I don't think this real estate transfer tax is gonna make or break that living in town is gonna become more expensive. The part that I like about the proposal is that the real way, in my view, to get the town to be more sustainable for a wider range of people is to get more affordable housing in this town. Period. And that means new development of different kinds of housing, that will balance out the housing portfolio that's out there. So to me, having the money dedicated to affordable housing makes sense. And or the other one that probably I would be persuaded to support would be capital investment. Because for any person living here in town, paying taxes in town, they're gonna be paying for the debt exclusion for capital improvements. So that way it feels like it's a direct payment to them. That people should pay as they arrive in town for services and benefits in the form of having neighbors that will be more different than they, thank goodness, because they can be part of that affordable housing world, and or that capital improvements get paid for. Seems like a reasonable notion that you pay as you come into town because you're gonna be here to benefit from the back units. So that's why I think as a transfer task at that point of sale, that makes sense. How it gets paid for, I agree, is gonna get interestingly negotiated between buyers, sellers, real estate agents, et cetera. But the logic behind it makes sense to me. But the focus on affordable housing is the one that I think is our biggest bang for the sustainability buck, and that's where I would like to see this go.
I agree with the statements around the table, and I don't want to repeat them. And I do acknowledge that the motivation behind this article is, to try to reduce some of the budget pressures we're all feeling. Brenda and me and Alan were actually on the advisory committee when we discussed this in 2022, and it's kind of a pleasure to have it come back. And I remember that the liaison at the time was let down, that the advisory committee didn't move forward with this. But she was kind of buoyed by the idea that we were going to study it and put more time into it and really do some research. And until this was proposed, I just haven't heard that there's been a body of research, that there's been like any kind of formal study. And when the article came across, I have several concerns about whether it is realistic at this time, and that includes the expectation that it could create for residents, because the article suggests that this transfer tax generate meaningful revenue and potentially reduce future budget pressure. And a vote at town meeting on this article doesn't generate revenue. It hasn't been approved for any town in Massachusetts. So the approval would require action by the legislature, which is uncertain and could take many years or may not occur at all. And I've been following this Municipal Empowerment Act. This is the third year, I believe, that it's been put forward by the governor to increase the meals tax cap and increase the excise and then lodging, which doesn't really relate to Hingham. But I've been following it because these are sort of meaningful townwide tax increases, and the legislature has not passed those. So I believe that a single town request to create a new, and the way the article is written, operating revenue tax, better a capital project tax, even better an affordable housing tax, really appears to face significant headwinds. I agree about the equity position, and I hadn't thought of it from Jerry's perspective, but that Brian brought up that this tax would generate far more revenue in communities with high property values and active real estate markets like Hingham. And that raises equity considerations that the legislature is going to weigh when they're evaluating petitions like this. So I really think this is an idea worth studying. I think the idea is really good, but I think at this time, we don't have it mapped out clearly, and I would have a hard time supporting.
Dave?
I agree. I wouldn't support it. It's not a fee, it's progressive tax. And like most progressive taxes, the impetus is backwards. It goes and looks for the money first and then finds a place to justify putting it in place. As morally supportable as that might be, and I would certainly support, making housing more affordable without a guarantee it goes to things like that. I just think it's a non-starter.
Just like to chime in on that point. Like when I first read this, my first thought was this is a tax, it's not a fee. And then when I was watching the 2022 meeting, it was Bob Curley, thank you, former AdCom chair. I was happy, he basically said the same thing right off the bat. It's like a fee is an implication that you're paying for service. And this is not necessarily that. And the only other thing I would add is one thing this article, the way it's written, does not seem to preclude, and I'm not an attorney, but it doesn't say anything about it not being negotiable. So it says it's the responsibility of the buyer, but that's not to say that a seller or even a realtor could potentially chip in a third, or however they might want to split it up, which could be an interesting aspect that is not really addressed here.
Yeah, I think they all specify who pays it, just so they know who to
What's
let
the
them.
hook?
Yeah, exactly. Who's writing the check? That,
Yeah.
all that. Yeah, Brian.
Two real quick ones. And they'll link into the discussion we're gonna have next, but the first thing is we are going to have costs associated with the affordable housing that we've undertaken. They haven't been budgeted for, as far as I know, alone. As is always true, if somebody disagrees, I'd love to hear contrary point of view. So those are costs that will be coming that aren't in the budget, and the formulation of this is being debated. If you can work out all the other practical issues with it, would support the cost that we are going to have to undertake that are not currently budgeted for. And the only other thing, you can run a lot of things up the flagpole. Some of them can be more likely to succeed or otherwise, but I think there's something that troubles me about when this has been described in a public meeting as something that could do away with overrides forever. So it takes on a level of impact. This is going on in the sense of informing people coming to town meeting, people reading the anchor. And I just don't think, as it stands right now, this is ready to be making that kind of feeling. And we'll link it all together here in a moment.
Can I just ask a question though? What's the affordable housing that you look down for?
Well, we comply with MBTA communities where we've undertaken
Zoning.
there haven't been a lot.
I didn't know if I was forgetting something, that's all. I understand what you're saying. Yeah, that's a fair question. Yeah, that's zoning by right, but I'm just asking, we don't actually have a project that's been approved that I'm not remembering.
Well, if we follow through on what we expect, I mean, we undertook it, expectation, we can't embrace that idea. There are costs associated with you're gonna have to the sewer costs, water costs, roadway costs. And under a certain scenario, you could have a lot of children coming into the schools. So, these are things that are, if it is taken to its endpoint, we have complied with ADU communities, we did fly right ADUs. And a lot of people hope that will succeed. There will be costs, to the extent that this is a vehicle to assist the town in those currently unbudgetable costs. It actually makes some sense, but what's being proposed is something very different.
Thank you. Any other from our group? Name and address, please.
Listen, Tully, 29 Back River. full disclosure, versus. And I know many of you here in the room who having served on advisory committee and you wonder, why am I here on a Tuesday night when I don't have to do this kind of thing? And it's because I think it's important for the town to look at potential other revenue sources. And as you were saying, you watch the South Shore News, every town is in dire trouble with this. And as an example of what this would transfer fee, it's a tax, but it's a one-time tax. It doesn't reoccur every year. So that's why I think they don't use the rule. I live at 29 Back River. The code was built there, has 220 rental units, was built there, I think about 8 years ago they started. It took about 2 years to go. They bought that property for $12 million and put a good amount of money in. But 3 years after it was finished, they sold it for $140 million. When they put the project in, they gave the town $1 million, and Mary would probably, I think that was it, just for the fire, right? But we're still here with the 220 units. And someone, and not that I'm against anyone making profits, but it's $140 million. Probably by a real estate trust. And 1% of that is 1.4 million, taking care of the chiller or whatever we were talking about. There's some big properties out there, and we're losing money by not, I think, we're losing potential revenue by not taking that into effect. So Stop and Shop has sold twice for $40 million in the last couple of years. There was one house, I was down in the assessor's office, that last year sold for $11 million. And so I don't think the 1%, and I can go with Jerry's to everybody pays the same thing, or you do what I think Bob Curley was looking for, is how do you make it affordable for the first time owner. Either way on that, as my sense is that the way this warrant article was written with affordable housing as its first priority was because that was the way all the other articles put forward in front of the State House are written. We've reached our affordable housing. State comes up with different stuff all the time. But when the code was built, that was 290 units. We at that time met the 10%. And as I recall, felt that area is through 2030. It's only reevaluated every 10 years on the census. So the number only comes up every 10 years. And the thought when that was built, because I was a big supporter of it in a neighborhood that was not supportive of this happening, is that, we were safe through 2030. We had enough sense that we could figure out how to manage through 2040. So that you don't have affordable. That doesn't mean you don't want to have affordable housing, that you don't want to support affordable housing, but you're not having your zoning bylaws taken away completely. So there's great value to having and keeping that 10% in order to keep what we want from the town. In my time, the advisory and slightly, the golden rules was reoccurring revenues for reoccurring expenses, non-reoccurring revenues for non-reoccurring expenses. And I would put this as a non-reoccurring revenue. And that's why I don't think it should go to operating. If I were in your seat, I would not put that in there. I think it should go to capital. It just gets lost in operating, and it's not as sellable to the State House as to if we just want slush funds of more money. We want to have it for the costs that come up, such as the chiller or something like that, and for big projects. It makes it a more stable town budget for people to work with. So they're buying into something that is favorable not only to the town, but to the sustainability of the town we live in. So I think it's a small price to pay, whether you're here or you're in Rockland, to have a percentage that goes to a fund that makes your budget more stable, not your reoccurring expenses. It's not a reoccurring revenue. And when we had the restaurant tax come forward, everybody thought, well, no one's gonna go to the restaurants. Everybody kept on going to the restaurants, nothing happened, and we get a lot of revenue from that. So I think it's a bold step. You have been bold before. We were the very first ones to apply, one of the very first, to apply for CPC funds. And because we were first in line, we got huge amounts because none of the other towns lined up yet. So it's not, you don't have to be the one for followables, you can be the leader. We got AAA bond rating because Ted Alexiadis went out of the norm of how this went about. And that changed everything for our town. But that is going outside of the box of what everybody else does. So sometimes you need to be creative, go outside of the box. I understand your hesitancy of no numbers for this and that. I haven't been involved with this at that level. The numbers, it would seem, would be fairly easy to come up with. And I think the decision is not so much what is the structure and whether you see it as something that everybody pays, or if you give an allowance so that first time buyers and what Bob Curl wanted. Whether you keep it at 1% all the way across, or does it graduate as it goes up? You know, maybe it's 1.5% when you get over 8 million. Something like that. Maybe commercial is different. We don't have a different commercial tax rate. Maybe on commercial it's something that's different. But I think it's worth thinking about as a potential for making the town more stable.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Pickleball. I think we're good. Great. Any more comments? Thank you. All right. We are on to town financial discussion part 2. New news, there is a part 3. We keep it this, there might be a part 4, but right now there's a part 3. So that's going to be on Thursday night. And that is going to be addressing debt, financing, debt related to our financial policy. And I'm bringing that up just so that, not to say there won't be some overlap in our conversation, but just so you know, there's a whole meeting that's going to be talking about our debt. So tonight, we find the presentation. Yeah. But go. So here we go. Focus on we're going to talk about tax impacts, come back to the uses of excess unassigned fund balance, and looking at the non-excluded debt and fund balance as they relate to capital expenditures. We get to slideshow, and then we'll get started. And who knows where the slideshow button is? One sec. It down here on the right.
Right.
Thank you. Okay.
Is there no one that can help you? I don't know Zoom at all. Is there no one that knows Zoom enough?
Okay, so I tried to hire high school students. I went out and I'm like, I will pay whatever it takes if you can give me a high school student. They have too much homework. I mean, go figure, 5 hours a night. Hey, I'm telling you.
I'll volunteer.
I will have someone after this one. I appreciate that, Tina. That I failed in my, what I thought was a brilliant quest. They could learn town government. a lot of money.
Becoming chair.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm really bad at it,
It's,
but I feel terrible.
I have a backup. I do. I do. I'm gonna say I've got some support here. Thank you. Huh?
Henry.
You'll get Henry back.
Anita is like,
Yeah.
she's here anyway.
Okay. I take you up on that, Anita. All right, so, Mary, I'm gonna let
So,
you.
just as orientation, the financial planning model. And, I just want to give a shout out to John Asher, volunteer extraordinaire, who created and has updated this model. All of these tax simulations come from the financial planning model. With Ted's assistance, that was updated in February for the new debt schedule, interest rates with capital market and things like that. So this is all driven off of the town's financial planning model, just as a way to start and as orientation. And this is for the average assessed value home, which, you know, we all heard from Erin Delaney when she was in, the average assessed value home is $1.3 million. And the exact number is up there, but the average assessed value home now is $1.3 million. So since that is often what's in the vernacular, that's what we used. What this slide shows is just based on existing commitments and the increase allowed under Prop 2.5. What would happen, what's gonna happen to our property taxes with absent any overrides or debt exclusions? And we're going out 5 fiscal years. The model can go out 10, but that gets to be a really busy chart. So what's gonna happen is for all of us in the next 5 years, our property taxes are gonna go up by about 3.4% every year, for a total of 17%. Now, what does that include? It's Prop 2.5. It's all of the excluded debt for foster and public safety, some of which was just issued. It also includes the pool for $8 million because that was already authorized and actually a bid was accepted earlier today. And what you see is those little purple bars are the increment year over year, but we also just drew a line to go from 26 to 31, just to kind of show, okay, what's going to happen over 5 years. Carol, if you want to maybe jump to the next one. I'm not going to kind of, go through this in detail, but what you're going to see in this presentation for each of the tax impacts, we've created a table that essentially says, what's the tax bill if your assessed value is $1 million? If it's, again, the average assessed value of 1.367, if it's 2 million, if it's 2.5. If you have a $5 million home, you double the 2.5. If your home is valued at less than $1 million, if it's $500,000, you take $1 million and kind of cut it in half. So same information, just for different assessed values.
And I just add there that we have the average at the 1.3. The median isn't here, but that's because it's just above the 1 million.
Right.
So our median is like $1,079,000. So it's a little bit over, but the million is a pretty good representation.
Yeah. So now let's look at what happens with HCAL. And again, so what we're assuming, and by the way, this is the same thing that's in the tax impact calculator that's on the website. So this is assuming that in FY27, we do a $15 million bond anticipation note or a ban. In 28, we do 30 million. And in 29, we fund with level principal debt. And again, under Mass General Law, you can't borrow for anything more than 30 years. And so if you're financing with bans, those years actually count. That's why we're at 28 years. So again, you can see the table, and what this represents is, this is the tax increase that's associated with the project. So if your house is valued at $2 million in FY27, your taxes are going to go up by $80 more than they would have, and then $160. The kind of full hit is FY29, and then because this is level principal debt, it does go down a little bit year after year. On the next slide, you'll see this is just kind of, again, a visual for the average assessed value home. And so what you see there is those little yellow bars at the top. represent the incremental associated with the HCAL project. And the numbers are down below. So again, the total increase, 3.8% in 27, then 3.9, 4% in 2021. So that's the little extra bump from the HCAL. We also know that we have school projects, and this is just a snapshot of what those look like. I know last week when we heard from Capital Outlay, there was discussion. What you see here is the current project estimate. We're assuming 30% MSBA, which then leads to a net cost to the town. And based on conversations, Carol, those were last night, I think, with the schools. The timing is that South and PRS will likely go first. And so you could see debt issuance in 27. The high school, we've assumed that's going to be a year later because of all the discussion we had. The high school number is a little bit higher in this than it is in the capital outlay report. We had gotten a summary from the schools that showed a little bit of a escalation for South. So erring on the side of conservatism, that's what we used. So the total borrowing, what we know right now, could be lower, could be higher. We're using 39.3 million. That's what we're using. So the next slide shows that's what this looks like. Again, we're doing a 1-year ban and a 29-year bond because the idea is that those projects would get done ideally over the summer. And you can again see this is the incremental tax impact for just this project. And then if you look on the next slide, this is again kind of what the graph looks like for the average assessed value home. And the little green bars that are on top of the little yellow bars represent the incremental amount associated with the school project. So we also know that there's the potential maybe for an override. We don't know the amount. We don't know the timing. So what you're going to see here is this is an estimate of a $5 million override in FY29. Now again, some of us might say, we don't think there's going to be an override that's that much. If you think it's 2.5, you can cut those numbers in half. For those who might think an override might be bigger, again, we can make those adjustments, but we just, for purposes of discussion, we put 5 million out there in 2029. This is a graph that shows, so this shows what happens. And again, this is the average assessed value, and Carol wanted to make sure if was capitalized and in red.
Red if is because we did this on our own.
If there was an override. And what you see on the left-hand side is this is the cumulative impact of all the things together. And the bars also represent that. So the red bars on top of the green bars on top of the yellow bars are the override. And really what it also illustrates is the tax impact of an override versus a debt exclusion. Roughly $1 million in a debt exclusion is about the same as 10 or 11 $11 million in excluded debt. So, what's
Say
that?
that again.
So I'll look at the exact number, but basically $1 million override has about the same tax impact as about 10 or 11 $11 million of excluded debt. So a $5 million override is kind of analogous to 50+ million in excluded debt. And that graph kind of illustrates the point. If we looked at this for the average assessed value home, or really, for any, what that would say is that between 26 and 31, if all those things happened at those amounts at that time, what we would see is about a 26% increase over 5 years. And remember where we started was 17%. So, the incremental tax impact of these three things is driving about an additional about an additional 9%. Again, based on these amounts, this timing. The beauty of the model is that it allows you to do all kinds of simulations with respect to timing and amounts and different things. So it's really, it's a very robust tool that it also allows different assessed values to be input. Anyway, I can tell you that when I did it for my house, it came out about the same like that, so. We also had a few questions and Steve asked some good questions, and so we put this chart together. This is a chart that's showing how we've used excess unassigned fund balance over the last 12 years. And so what you see on the very far left is, this is annual town, these were annual town meeting warrants. And what you see in that first group is, Carol and I kind of put that into what we call one-time uses. So these are things like a warrant article, like in 2023, you'll see a warrant article for 1.2 million. That was for a fire truck. The 850, anyway, you have those one-time uses. Also, we've got the school extraordinary capital in there because that kind of feels like a one-time use. Back in 2019, that was first established for Foster. You can see for 2025, annual town meeting authorized an additional amount, and then you see the amount for that is going to be proposed at the 2026 annual town meeting, $770,000. And I should mention that 850 and 26, that is the 2 civil service articles and electronic voting. Then the middle area is capital. And this is kind of two things. It's additional capital outlays. So all the DPW capital from last year, was about 4 million. What you see in 26, that is the chiller. It is the high school
Fire safety.
It's the high school fire safety, and it's the East School BRU. Right. And if you look up a little bit in 2022, Brenda and Tina might remember, but there was like a whole package for the fire department. It was like an ambulance, it was some roof repairs. And then on the right-hand side, you see capital project feasibility and design. For 2020, that was seed money for, I believe, Foster, and then last year, $6.5 million, which was for HCAL, and it was also for the 3 roof projects. So that's kind of what's in capital. And then this third column, what we tried to do is take excess unassigned fund balance that was used for operating expenses. What you see in the first column, it says transfer to the reserve fund. This is the Article K thing that comes up every year. So this is basically, again, just to kind of remind us, at the beginning of the year, we have a reserve fund in our Article 6 budget. So we put a little money into our checking account for things that might come up for snow and ice. Sometimes what happens is that during the year, that reserve fund isn't sufficient. This winter is a really good example. We've got $800,000 in that reserve fund, and we're not, we're gonna need more money. So what you see in that column is what we requested from town meeting. Now I want to point something out, because as Jerry and Brian have told us, when we developed the Article K, we deliberately err on the side of conservatism, because we want to make sure there's enough money in the checkbook before we close the year. Otherwise, we'd have to call another town meeting. So even though town meeting appropriated those amounts, anything that wasn't spent, so if we had a transfer of $200,000 for legal services, and the legal bills only added up to 150, that $50,000 drops to fund balance. So it doesn't it doesn't get spent, it gets returned. Then you'll see in the second column, we've got the school putback from the MOU. We have the 26 and 27 amount. And then we have the proposed health insurance subsidy in 26. And then you'll see on the very far right-hand side, the total uses of excess unassigned fund balance.
It is interesting tying into Mary's comments earlier. When you look at the number of years that it's below $1 million. And that was, just a reminder, we had a lot of comments that we were holding on to our money, our purse of money, with a death grip. Anyway, just to give it a little historical context, remind you of the historical lack of use of it.
And then on this next slide, what you'll just see is that you see the capital information pulled over. But then we also thought we had a conversation with Steve, and one of the things that we added over here is what we borrowed with non-excluded debt. And those things are things like the North Fire Station, borrowing money for road improvements. There was a Plymouth River window project where we used actually the $1 million that Lissa mentioned from Broadstone Bear Cove went towards that window project, but it couldn't cover all the costs. We did fiber optic network and data center, some fire apparatus. The last time we did dredging, because Ken Corson was so good at getting grants, the town only had to pay about $2 million. So we actually financed that with debt, seawalls. So anyway, again, these are some authorized amounts. And so again, just kind of a picture of the capital.
Can we go back one slide, just a back?
Needs clarification. This would be the second last.
Second slide.
I know, that's why, right, what you call it, second to last. Okay, so right there, so if you look at the capital, the center column, the 2025 additional capital outlay, look at that and look at the 6.5 million. So together, that's 10.5 million. And all of us that were here, remember, we spent more like 7 million. So I think what's in the 6.5 is the school roof, which was funded with debt. That's like $3 million. The school roof design was funded with debt. HCAL school and the 2 elementaries were funded with outlay.
Yeah.
And then the 3.9, I don't have all the numbers, but it's basically DPW for $1.3 million, pickleball for $1.3 million, the turf field for 900 grand. That's like 3.5, and I'm missing something somewhere else. But that's
Digitization for 40,000.
Whatever, but I just want to point out that we only spent 7-ish from unassigned fund last year. And so 3.5-ish or so of that 6.5 was funded in that.
That's correct, that was a long discussion. That was a long discussion about using debt for the high school roof design.
You don't even worry about that, I just don't.
So Mary?
And I have
1 second. DPW pool, pickleball, turf field, design for HCAL and roofs, digitization of town records. You know what, thank you, Steve. I suspect that 6.5 does include the high school that should have been borrowing on the next slide, so we'll fix that.
Just a point of clarification. If I look at this, tell me if I'm wrong. I think fund balance this year is going to come down about 9 million from roughly 11 to about 2. And I think what these 2 slides, this one and the next one, suggest is that decline 7 million was was costs that otherwise would be in either A, the operating budget, or B, excluded debt for capital projects. That's the alternative treatment to that, correct? So I had 1,738,000 and 1,350. That looks to me like about 2 million right there. And then in 26, under capital outlay, 4.4. And if that were the alternative funding of that in terms of source of funds, is it correct to say that that would have been either going to go through the operating budget or through a capital budget, but it came out of fund balance?
Well, again, so the 4.4 million is the chiller and it is Article NN, which is the life safety and ERU.
But still, the choice was made, it came out of fund balance.
Well, again, I think the financial policy says that if we have excess unassigned fund balance, one of the potential uses is capital, because, you know, trying to fit those $4 million purchases into an operating budget is tough. Even to Jerry's point about debt, if you had non-excluded debt, again, that's going into the Article 6 budget, so.
I mean, some of that is getting paid down. I mean, if you look at the slope for the non-excluded debt, it's got a nice, slope going down, but
Jerry,
how much could fit in?
Jerry kind of nicely closed the loop when I failed to do it earlier. There's a funding decision on the source of the funds. And it can't come out, maybe compliant with financial policy, it can come out of fund balance. Or alternatively, it could be, I stopped saying it could be an article that failed to set it, is what Jerry said. It could be an article call for excluded debt. Is that the right way to think about it?
I would say not excluded. Right, so excluded debt is debt. It's an override.
Yeah.
Well, non-excluded debt is simply
Within the letter.
within the letter.
Yeah.
So I think, one of the things that if you look at those capital numbers, and, my apologies, that 6.5, I think should be 2.5 lower because of the design for the roofs. If you think about the progress the town has been making in investing in capital and getting things off the backlog, it's leaned into fund balance in the last couple of years to make those meaningful impacts. To the extent that as a funding source goes away, the potential for that capital backlog to continue to get higher is there, which I think is, you've been chatting about that a little bit.
One of the reasons I reached out to Mary and Carol as they were doing this was when someone says we need to think about what an override looks like. And so if someone's trying to size that override, they ought to be looking historically at what we've been spending on operations and capital. And it's difficult to see that in the forecast or the actual results, and things are being spent out of fund balance. So this was, I think it's difficult for me. So that's the reason I was asking this. And it leads to the discussion, to my mind, kind of what Jerry's bringing up and this funding question. We have these inconsistent years of how much we're spending from fund balance on things that everybody admits can't fit into the budget, can't fit into the capital outlay budget. But it's not like they're newer emergencies. They're old buildings. What does somebody do with an old building? They create a rainy day fund, a reserve fund. And so you ought to be thinking about evening out your uses of unassigned fund balance and funding in, I don't know what you want to call it, whether it's capital, it's probably not capital stabilization, because that's meant to just throw in, like an equipment purchase fund, whatever you want to call it, but you would build that up over time. And then when the library comes up at $1.8 million, you're not chasing and hoping you have unassigned funds, or the schools show up with these late $4 million requests, $2.5 million. And you're wondering, where's the money? Well, the money is what you've been storing away for that purpose based upon a schedule of when buildings are gonna need new systems, I know.
No, so that's, I just. So if I can put it my way, you're suggesting there should be effectively a policy that puts so much of the fund balance into some
Something,
form of a
something.
stabilization fund. That's
Something
that's
that
sort of predictable.
we're spending well ahead of the capital outlay allocation. And we ought to just be able to see what that looks like and not just chase down what we've been spending from spare cash.
Well, and to your to your point about the capital outlay too, is how low we are on the end of our balance, our policy. You know, we're still tickling 3%, yeah. Okay, yeah, 3.0, it's over, so, yeah. But no, I think that's another way to look at it is how, when you talk about whether it's sizing and override, but how to get that higher, whether it's midway to its whatever. Sorry, Ted. Go ahead.
No. I just want to add, you just eloquently described where my head was at with Article X. And Brian made a great point about future affordable housing costs that at some point we're going to be up against, whether it's development or additional burdens with the school. But getting back to the capital, that's perfect. And I got the idea from Jerry because he was talking about that very thing about just all the buildings we have and the maintenance that's inevitably going to be coming within years. That was just my quick comment.
Great, Tina?
A tiny point. But when we're talking about uses of excess unassigned fund balance in 2024, the motion was made from the floor to increase the school operating budget by $2 million, and that $2 million was taken from unassigned fund balance. So would that belong in this chart?
Thank you.
Additionally, I've been scouring while I'm trying to listen the 2023 town meeting report. And frankly, the 2022, when we hired 36 full-time positions for the town and the schools. And I thought we used some amount of excess unassigned fund balance for that in one of those years, but I can't find the exact number in the warrants because I don't know that that was all federal ESSER ARPA money.
No, it was, you're right. I think during the pandemic years, there was, and it's getting to the point of not having all this in one place because there was no warrant article for those things.
Correct.
There,
that's why
it kind of just
hit the emergency line.
No, it just sort of appears as a source of revenue in like your 5-year forecast. So, you know, poof, you put 3.6 on the fund balance line. And town meeting isn't really signing off on that. Town meeting is signing off on the appropriations that go against it, which speaks to a broader question because in 2021, the town used 3.6 million of fund balance. In 22 and 23, there were sizable amounts.
it says 6.7 and 3.78, but it also, it's the same line that says fund balance / federal funds. So we have to get to the specific amount.
Yeah, so the federal funds they had to come into the 5-year forecast via fund balance, but the excess unassigned fund balance did supplement. You know, we propped up the budget for 3 fiscal years with $5 million each year in one-time money. And that led to the override. That's why $6 million of the override was to retain services. So that's a good catch.
That's before I got here. Say that means.
Thank God you're here.
Thank you very much. No, really.
It just makes it such an interesting, it's such an interesting story, and I wouldn't have thought of it without looking at this and seeing it so clearly illuminated that I'm like, oh, wait, and there's more. Yeah. This is so well done, Carol, Mary, thank you for the beginning of, this discussion. It really, I think it's really valuable. Is that the end of it?
It is, that's why. Which is why we did part 3. We knew you'd be asking for more, so part 3 is ready.
Can't stream every episode tonight.
Is it just enough? Sort of, okay. It's sort of a follow-on, if we're not, that first thing wasn't really a question, that was just an observation. So this counts as my question, okay, no, as my, in any event. When we go back to those slides that show the different tax impacts of the things that are projected or proposed. I remember talking to John Asher some years ago about how much more an override impacts a taxpayer than does a capital project. And one of the things that personally I liked about 3 slides back is when we're looking at the Center for Active Living, I felt as though I don't want to underscore the importance of tax impacts on our citizens. At the same time, the highest number, the year that is impacted the most with the big borrowing goes from like 3.8 to 4.0% of the tax impact. And that one more back.
This one?
Yes, thank you. One of the things that I have been trying to explain in my comments that I haven't been able to illuminate very well is that we have a lot of headwinds facing the town. We have a lot of hard decisions to make in the future. But I don't feel that the Center for Active Living is should be considered a cause of this. It's comparatively a small impact from what I'm seeing here compared to the whole picture. That's all I wanted to say.
Brenda, it was Brenda and then you, Brenda. No, Brenda's first.
My question is, where did the 7 million that went into the capital stabilization fund to pay for Foster and public safety in 2022, where did that show? Because that was 7 million out of unassigned fund balance.
So the on this graph,
Back in when we were listing uses of unassigned funds.
thank you, another catch, we're gonna
play with it. That's why we have to do it. Yeah, right.
We need.
No, this, yeah. Note to self.
At least in my opinion, was a highly impactful investment of $7 million.
Thank you.
Back then.
Yep.
And just so you know, in the tax impact slides, the gray bars reflect the use of those funds consistent with the forecast. So those gray bars would have been higher without the application of those funds.
Right.
Okay. It probably helps to make a couple of remarks about fund balance and what drives it. And I have the distinct privilege in 24 of doing the study on that, and how it's been paid through time as well. And basically it's driven by your tax levy, the local receipts, which is, meals tax, excise tax, interest income, so forth, and turnbacks, the departmental turnbacks at the end of the year. You roll them all together and it's closed out into fund balance, if that's a significant plus number. The observation lately is local receipts have been flattish. The other elements, the interest income has been elevated, and Tom has projected that we'll come back to a much more moderate figure, but it was, I think, 6 million a year ago. It's still above trend, but probably settling out at about 1 million a year, which is difference in 5. And the turnbacks, as the departments feel more pressure, have diminished over the years, which is exactly what it's kind of intuitive that budgets get a little bit tighter, budgeting becomes tighter, the leftover at the end of the year is diminished. So the prognosis for the local receipts in general, and for some of these other drivers of fund balance, it's probably a little robust, less robust today than it would have been during the boom years. A lot of money to go around. The other takeaway at the time I spent doing this This 24, was it's economically cyclical. And 28, Jerry, you were here, 29, no, what? Oh, wait. Oh, wait. Back in the great financial crisis. Jerry was the chair, and I'm not blaming you for this, but fund balance. Fund balance actually went down 30%. Because things like deals tax and the purchase of new vehicles that you pay big money excise tax and so on and so forth, it was a much less supportive environment for local receipts. And you saw local receipts and fund balance go down, and fund balance went down 30%. So there's a surprising element of cyclicality depending on whether you think the world we live in is prognosis is great or conversely not so great. But need to bear that in mind too. Fund balance is not straight up and to the right.
Any other comments, questions? Okay. Thank you. We'll be back.
I was gonna make an unsolicited vote on increase Mary's pay revolt.
Second.
From zero.
Zero
plus zero.
I really put that into the operating budget.
Yeah.
Use.
No. Amen.
Linda's the collective
The
bargaining
thought
agreement of the whole
Yeah.
bag pocket.
It's the thought. It is absolutely the thought.
Can I just make an observation that this really is such valuable information and you take this all, I take this all in. And I'm trying to digest it on the fly. And I'm just wondering exactly how to apply it against, or the budgets we're voting, the articles that we're voting. I mean, there's so many threads to pull with this that I'm wondering how we have discussions, like fulsome discussions about these things. You know, John asked last year, are we gonna vote this all together? Are we gonna, look at this as one unit? And this really is illuminating.
But I also think it's a great point to take time for digestion. I know you've had it ahead of time, but I do think the conversation and everybody's comments are adding a lot to it. We'll send the debt out tomorrow, the next slides. So, or later tonight, send out the next slide deck. And that's like 4 or 5 slides. Again, myself, I think when you're looking at them, we've spent a lot of time talking them through. So just looking at but again, Thursday. So we can decide, I think, on Thursday. Maybe that's what's on the agenda. Double the agenda a little bit, but on the 18th, to just kind of come back and see if anybody does have any other reflections on how to think about it. I think the debt was going to help inform a little bit, the use of fund balance and back to this, how we want to think about that from, the push and pull of, and our policy. I mean, I went through and highlighted all the lines in our policy, and it was really helpful for me to think about it. And remember how much we did talk about last year, even reordering how things were used, but not forgetting that that's what the excess is there for, is at least to use it, whether it goes into a stabilization fund or it's used for current purchases. But yeah, I think it's going to make sense to come back and see if we have any other thoughts at the end.
Thank you.
Notice the hand is up.
That's Dave's job. Not mine.
Diane's been an apple.
Yes.
Carol, is it okay to speak?
Please, Diane.
Oh, hi, Diane DiNapoli, 16 Gardner Street. Thank you. This is immensely helpful. And I was wondering if it would be possible when it is sort of tweaked, could that be put directly into the meeting notes? Because sometimes as an audience member, there's great presentations, but then it's not easy to go back and actually see them as attachments in the notes or somewhere else. So just a thought, would be really good, I think, for more people to be able to see this online. Thank you.
That sounds great, Diane. Thank you for the suggestion. And we can look at whether it's,
Worst
It
case, we
probably-
can always link to the video.
well, I think, but I also think we could put this on our underused website. Possibly the same way, we didn't know we had a website over there. We did not know, that's embarrassing. It's not for you, for all of us,
But I could
but,
definitely attach. to the
but
notes.
to the notes too. I mean, because I'm pretty sure there's a couple of others from the past that we should be putting up as well. Any other comments before we move on? Thank you very much. The next agenda item, Brian, I don't know if there's anything you want me to put up, but I know you wanted to make comments before, we have our Thursday meeting.
Can you put up the many?
Yes, just thinking that there were, maybe make sure I get the right one.
Yes. Yeah, I sent it around.
Yeah.
Well, depending on whether or not people care to see it or.
Yeah, sure, to have it, might as well have it up there. Just give me a second to, I'll find it.
And just a point of housekeeping, when are we planning at this point to vote this, ask questions to the school committee?
That's Thursday's meeting, is the school committee is coming back for questions and,
Okay.
yep, and then, potentially vote it, at that meeting. If we need to not do it at that meeting, we will look at what date, is appropriate after that, but, we just, did I get that up here?
I thought you were gonna vote it right now, Tina.
that one,
Is that what your hands up?
no,
Okay, just checking. Thank you.
last year I think we voted the budgets together.
We did, and we're doing that.
Okay.
So great point. I'm sorry. That is on the, it's actually on the 18th. All right, now. There you go, Brian.
Okay. Then I guess for me, but you also had it in your email box. So anyhow,
It's on the Dropbox.
the purpose of this is kind of twofold. To share some sort of very factual data about the budget that will be in front of you. And then secondly, to speak to some of the going forward issues, to kind of build upon the work that Mary did, which is more global on the global town budget. So with that being said, the most basic way of looking at this is that the budget did indeed meet the terms of the MOU. The net budget for 27, 72.8 aligns with the 3.5% growth allowed by the MOU. The context, enrollment is more or less down in line with recent trends, about 1%. Regular ed down about 4, in district up about 8, out of district down 5 based on enrollment currently. Total enrollment is now about 17% below 2015 levels, reflecting both demographic trends and to a lesser extent, the loss of students to private schools. And these trends are common experience in tier towns. And that's part of the struggle that the school districts face, is that enrollment has been flat to death, with some exceptions, but not many. In terms of the adjusted budget growth, that's 7.7%. In recent years, it's been somewhere in the order of 5 3/4, 6%. Higher this year. Calculation adds back funding sources that are outside of the MOU, including the increase in the year-to-date charge to the town budget for excess out of district. And the drawdown of 2.1 million in revolving funds, which the school committee remarked on one of their early school committee presentations of the budget as being not sustainable, but really aimed towards getting to the next override.
So you roll it all together on an adjusted basis, it's about 7.7%. Total adjustment is 4.2. In terms of, there's a funding gap as a result of this. Had the schools not had the sources of funding beyond the town stipulated MOU, there would be a 27 funding gap of 5.6%. 4.2 million, which is the entire 27 put back of 2.1 plus the drawdown from the revolving funds. And at the current adjusted growth rate, this will continue to grow post 27 because the put back from the town is growing. It may moderate because no further drawdown in revolving funds, but I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole. So leave it at that. Net audit district costs were up 20%. They're budgeted 5.5 million, up 10%. Gross cost, that is. There's a problem with state and federal aid. They haven't been keeping up, and as a result, net spending goes up faster than gross spending. So net audit district costs are up 25% annually in the last 3 years. And they're now 8% of the total HPS budget. In contrast, net costs for regular education grow about 1.2%, in districts at about 4.8%. So enrollment is down, net tuitions are up 19-20% in total dollars. The district expects 14% out of district costs in out of district students in 27, 51 versus about 61. But budgeted tuition costs next year imply 12% growth. And the only inference I can make from that is what's being budgeted for average tuitions is up about 12%. This year, the state approved an increase on an average basket of out of district tuitions of about 3.8%. Again, because the federal offsets are lagging, gross spending will grow 24%. So we had a conversation about special services, which were up 29%, and they were the main driver of district costs. Now, we'll talk about that for a moment. It's been confirmed by the town administrator that non-tuition specialized services were intended to be in the MOU. Now, I was at AdCom in 24 when the MOU was signed. In my view, it was our collective opinion that we're paying for out-of-district costs. And I've had ongoing year-to-year discussions going back to Margaret Adams when she was superintendent. And I asked the question I've been on ACES for 3 years. I asked the question of Margaret back as we prepared for the 24 budget. And I looked at those specialized services and I said, why are they growing at 68% per year per student? And I really didn't get a very clear answer. So I went back and looked at it on my own. And I think this was a shared interpretation of those costs. I looked at them and I said, these are costs that wrap around, add on to the tuitions. You know, kid needs additional services outside of the tuition. And so clearly, since what we're talking about is out of district costs, these are directly linked to out of district students. So lately we found out that these are in fact entirely in district costs. They're now a major driver, the major driver of the putback of the town. They're the fastest growing piece of the out of district budget. They're up 29%. And they account for 32% of the expected 2.1 increase in out of district costs that will absorb in 27. Since the base year in 24, they've grown 151%. Interesting, if you look at the gross school budget that is budgeted for 27, the 1.7 million in specialized services costs were about 10% of gross in district. So it says to me a significant part of spending for the industry program is now going back to the town. And if people want to make the decision that perhaps you should have made it more clear, I'm not here to argue that, but it does have going forward implications. because the adjusted growth rate that results from that and the funding gap that I related a moment ago, which is about, what did I say, 5% of the budget, 5.6%. This is an essential part of it. And so this funding gap has a lot of linkage to some of the things that Mary has talked about. It has a lot of linkage to the size and need for potential new MOU, for a new override. It has implications for whatever we do next in terms of a future MOU. And 4.2 million funding gap will continue to grow. And I recommend you get a lot of consideration in shaping the new MOU and the sizing of the eventual override. In terms of the putback, just to give a little further detail, it's 2.1 million for 738,000 now modeled for fiscal 26. That's a pretty significant increase. And I'll leave it to others to judge what should and shouldn't be in and should be out. But the thing that jumps out to me is a familiar theme here. The question is, how should this be funded? The putback for 26 is being funded retrospectively. And we will present the figure at town meeting. And it's really a liability. Those costs have been spent. So the taxpayer attendee at town meeting really can't say no because the town has to pay the costs. But in terms of budgeting, which generally is forward-looking, not retrospective, I think was a really strong case. This should be budgeted for prospectively as part of the fiscal 27 budget. And it should be presented to town meeting as such. And that will be for the group side. Questions?
I think this is very helpful, but I'm curious. What is the argument is the right word, but what is the justification for taking a look at a school budget, which includes a forward-looking $2.1 million number as part of their operating budget that Article 6 will pay for, needs to be paid? What's the argument for not funding that appropriation now and waiting a full year? Makes no sense.
So there's a couple of reasons. One, the Article K can't fund next year's expenses. So that's just not the way that article works. The way that article works is we get together again, we get together in April and we get an estimate of the numbers and we vote that estimate and that comes to town, the town meeting to vote on. Then we get together, if you remember, at the end of June and early July, where we get the final numbers. And that's when we vote to transfer the money out of Article K. So we put the money in Article K, in the reserve fund in April. And then we vote it out of the reserve fund to the municipal or the school. When we get the final numbers at the end of June or early July. So that's why we'll have a meeting on the schedule that's right around year end to actually pay 26s. Anything that isn't spent drops, as this came up earlier, drops to fund balance as of 6/30, our fiscal year end for this year. There's no mechanism to put more money in that and not have it just go right back to fund balance. So that reserve fund doesn't work. We could create a new reserve fund and direct it to 27. But a reserve fund cannot be just for a specific purpose. A reserve fund has to be somewhat broader than that. So it would have to say for out of district tuitions or any other legal reason. So that's John Coughlin doing some research.
Well, it seems to me that.
But can I just finish? No, I get you. I want your comment, but I just think this is having worked through some of this. So that doesn't work. The third is the MOU tells us it goes through the Article 6 process. I mean, so we have a process, we have an agreement that specifically says, this is how you do it. And now we're gonna, try to figure out how to change the process. I'm not disagreeing with you, and all these are great points for a future MOU. I'm just making the point that the MOU specifically says, he happens to be on that line item. Special education reserve funds to the OOD, wait a minute, let me back up to the sentence and read the whole one. The school department will apply applicable circuit breaker reimbursements, grant funding, and to the extent possible, special education reserve funds to the OOD tuition and special education contract costs before seeking the use of Article 6 reserve fund. So it's specifically telling us how to fund it.
It seems to me that, without knowing all the intricacies and all the details, that we have a problem that we have a lot of reasons why we can't do it. We kind of need our counsel to come to us and tell us how it is we can do it, because, sending around a memo like this that tells us what unassigned fund balance are, and this exact memo was put on board at the select board meeting, it completely ignores this 2.1 million. It doesn't take it out of the end of year balance, and it doesn't show up in what it's going to look like next year. It's like, where is the 2.1? We have to get Waldo out there.
No, you're right. What it's telling you is the replenishment to get to 9. And the 2.1 comes out of the 9. We don't know what else comes out of the 9. I agree with you. I understand the point. It's showing you why we think it's getting rebuilt up, but of course it's a concern. It's a concern if you look at this year's, because now you're down to 2 million and we're talking about 2.1. Granted, that's assuming everything gets we vote on everything that's already in there. I'm talking with John actively on where else we could do this from. I mean, as I said, one would be creating a new warrant article with, it's assuming the select board would be willing to open the warrant to create a new article, and with little under 2 weeks to go, kind of more like 8 days. So I'm happy. I appreciate it, but there's a little angst here in doing it now. Yes.
Two comments.
Yep.
This is 1.25% of the prospective budget. It's not frivolous.
No, I'm not suggesting it's frivolous. I'm just telling you what the rules,
So secondly, this agreement on the blue paper was never a legal agreement. This was a best efforts. It wasn't lawyered in small detail. There are not a lot of collateral supports. It was never thought to be binding on anyone. It was quote unquote best efforts.
Legally, no. Morally, that's another question.
Well,
I'm just saying,
that's a good question.
it is. But
I mean, to hold up a piece of paper and to say, read it as though this is a lawyerly thing, that was never the status.
I don't think anybody's saying it's a lawyerly thing. I'm just saying what the agreement says.
The final thing I neglected to add at the very end, and I'll be very brief about this because the hour is getting late. I did take it upon myself to do some modeling of the future, given the total of what we talked about here. And when you stop and think of projecting deficits, it's actually a pretty mechanical thing. We have revenues that grow 3% until further notice. We have the biggest budget in town growing 7.7%. You can posit that all the other municipal departments grow 3.5%, which is pretty accurate, but in terms of the total budget, we have shared services, which we've heard again and again and again, are growing more than 3.5%. We've heard about insurance and whatnot, but I rolled it together very simplistically. Schools grow 7%. Other departments grow 3%, 3.5%. And expenses and the revenue constraint is 3% of your top line. Where does that lead us over the next 6, 7, 8 years? Now we know that in 2035, there's this very positive thing as the pension fund cost drops off. So the struggle is between here and 34. And the only point I'm going to make is the accumulating deficits are very substantial. And I don't know if there's anything meaningful about the 5 million number being passed around. But 5 million is not enough to fill the void, the funding gap.
I understand that it's
so,
a made up number because we don't know what the number is.
But when you stop and think of plugging that gap, there's a decision made, some of it's gonna be it overrides, perhaps plural, some of it's gonna be expense reductions, but you need eventually to fill the gap to get 334. It's more than maybe 5 million is just a placeholder, but it's big enough to think carefully about.
Good. But, yeah.
Just a small point, which is the excess OOD over 2% projection for last year was $1.3 million and is coming in this year projected at 738,000. So that it just is consideration when we're looking at projection for next year as 2.1 million. We know, given how these budgets work, that 2.1 million is not necessarily accurate. So that makes this
That's why it's
exercise.
there. It's an uncontrollable expense, yeah. Well, unpredictable expense, whatever words we want to use.
Expense.
I'm just saying.
But it's hard to suggest it can be fully accurate.
Fair.
Are we talking now about this year's excess OOD number, or are we not talking about that?
That's actually on Thursday's agenda.
I mean, this is not really Article K of kind of business.
Yeah, it kind of is. The OOD is Article K.
Right.
But there are two numbers, just to be clear, that there's currently an estimated 738,000 for 26. That's the liability that's going to be paid in arrears, and that's just a given. Then there's the forward-looking 27 budget, which is 2.1. And the question there is, how do you fund that? How do you fund the 2.1? Is it prospectively? Are you going to do it again the way we handled 26?
So I had asked a question, maybe Steve has already covered this. I'm getting kind of weary eyed though. The line 132, which is the reserve fund allocation, that is saying is $838,000 or something. And typically we try to guess what that number is.
No,
Do we not?
no,
We just do it formulaically.
0.75. That's because to get it inside the 3.5% budget. That's the only way you could do it, even though, and I will say to Steve's point, that, whether you look at it over at the legal fees are in there, in a budget, and that's a structural deficit. They're always higher. How much higher they are, but they're always higher, and they come out of that. Well, Steve's made that.
Always objected to illegal budget.
Yeah, if in the meeting you hear hold, more likely than not, I'm not just kidding. But meeting, there's a few other things in there but my point is that our first step is a 0.75%.
Just to link this conversation to what I just presented. The majority of Tom's snow and ice and legal is budgeted prospectively. That's the 0.75% set aside. And then what we see in April is the true up.
Right.
That's done, if you want to say retrospectively, but the bulk of it is actually done prospectively.
It kind of is. We've always said that the 0.75 is the best guess. And this is long before we had MOD. We've always said that's good practice. And, we see from the chart that it frequently doesn't hold up. Sometimes it does. And, we don't try to under budget it because we don't know from year to year or in the long haul if we will have excess in some fund balance to pay it off. So I think the 0.75 is a guideline. It's maybe a minimum. But anyway, having said all.
No, and I'm just saying, having gone through, what we use that for, the 0.75 also, remember on the municipal side, when we vote on a budget for police, that's all police can use. So very frequently what we end up, doing the transfer at year end, after it's been incurred, same kind of frustration there, but is when something, the boiler here blows up and we need a $50,000 boiler, and that's not in the budget anywhere. So it includes snow and ice that's unpredictable, but it also includes things that weren't budgeted for, that were totally unpredictable happening. Yes, Mary.
So if I just have
Okay,
one thing,
sorry.
I'm sorry. So I just want to give a, maybe a preview to our discussion on the numbers for Article 8. One of the things that, that you quoted in the MOU is that the school department shall use every effort to not draw down funds from the ZO fund up to and including, you know, circuit breaker idea and the special ed stabilization fund. And I would just like to respectfully ask for an accounting of how the school department has done that. Is there anything left in the special ed stabilization fund? Really kind of go to the words of that section of the MOU and make sure that 738 is the right number. Because I know at this point, I'm not sure that we've heard that that really is the right number in terms of all the other sources that should be the first resort before coming back to the town's reserve fund. So that's just a request that we make sure we have all that info when we're discussing the actual dollars for our program.
Mary?
I just make, one point on this, which is that under Massachusetts general law, municipalities are not allowed to deficit spend. The only carve out of that is for snow and ice, and that's under Mass general law. And communities are supposed to, and part of that is so that when we put a budget together for a town meeting, we're saying, hey, these are the services we're gonna give you, and this is how much we think it's gonna cost to deliver those services. So we don't come back after the fact and say, oh, it cost us more, sorry about that, we need some more money. And so the reserve fund is intended to account for things that happen in the year that despite everybody's best efforts, et cetera. As I look at the structural deficits in legal, police and fire overtime, and now, you know, this particular issue, one could argue falls into that category. I guess as a finance committee member, I'm asking myself, at what level are we kind of out of step with Mass general law and building a budget that we knowingly is not going to be enough to cover things? And it's both from a Mass general law perspective and a disclosure with the community. And you know, I understand that these numbers can fluctuate year to year, but at some point, I just wonder, like, if that Article K number gets to be $2 or $3 million a year, is the Department of Revenue, or frankly, a citizen on the floor of town meeting gonna go, hey, wait a minute, like this isn't right. So my struggle is more from a fiduciary responsibility and disclosure perspective. I don't know the solution to it, but I just hope we consider that as we figure out how to deal with these things.
Well, John Coughlin's working on it, so we'll see if we can come up with a way to get it in there.
In fact, it's reduced his fees. I think we should be grateful. Reduce his fees. But just to conclude, and then I'll check out here. I think here in the school budget and globally on the total budget, we could be a lot more transparent because the town has come to think the school budget grows 3.5%. And that hasn't been true for quite some time. And there are other things. I mean, the capital budget is not exactly what it appears to when you're using fund balance. That's kind of off the grid. And what should be strived for here is more transparency, that when people go to town meeting, they can number one, comprehend what's going on. Number two, vote accordingly. I think.
Any other comments?
Thank you for the summary, Brian.
Yeah. Yes, President.
This is tangential, so you may say you can't do it, but since S was on the agenda, can I bring up a question about S?
Sure you can.
Brian, in your recommended motion, you reference borrowing, transferring available funds of the 770,000. What if, I think at least according to what I see, it looks like the plan is unassigned fund balance. Is there a borrowing option that you are considering as an appropriate way to generate to fund the 770,000?
Trying to reorient my brain at 15 to a different issue.
I think you just didn't write from unassigned fund balance in the recommendation.
Sorry,
I did the same thing.
did I inadvertently do that?
Well, I did the same thing when I did I don't mean to put words in your mouth, but I
You
did
can
this.
probably tell from the spirit of everything I've said all evening long, I probably have some reluctance to recommend that it come out of fund balance. And I probably would have been, if we were scheduled to talk about this, but there's some lack of clarity about what the number actually was. And I guess the school committee, the select board voted it tonight. But whatever the number is, I just have qualms about fund balance. And we can talk about it when the time comes and.
I was just wondering if you had another proposal, because I wanted to think about that other proposal if you had one.
Yeah, I did not mean to put fund balance. I've written so many things coming out of fund balance, that's my just.
So there's no
go-to
proposal
thing.
on the table to consider.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, I appreciate it. Don?
Is there an amount that's too small for debt? Like, can we take multiple things and put them together in a year, like something like this, or is that?
I actually think that's in our policy that you can't do that, but they're pretty small numbers. So they're like, you're not supposed to borrow for, is it 40,000, 25,000? There's a number like that, and they don't want you to aggregate
They don't.
those, but a bunch of 25 to get to a big one. But I mean, you know, most of the things that we're talking about, you know, are still in the hundreds of thousands. And the answer is, yeah, we can do that with, you know, my memory, again, going back to hearing Michelle Monsignor, you know, in my ear is, you know, remember for some of these, we are adding a cost with interest. And today we're adding a higher cost, meaning, you know, we had free, you know, almost interest-free loans for quite a few years, and that might have made more sense today, you know, with the interest rates being just a bit higher. You want to incur an interest cost for something that's $100,000 or $300,000 because you do have fund balance. But, you know, that doesn't mean we can't do it. I mean, it doesn't mean we can't recommend it.
Yeah, I didn't know if there was a procedure or a rule against the aggregation. That was just my only.
There is a statement in there. I'd have to go look for it, but there's something that, you know, kind of you know, discourages aggregating, but very small amounts.
Yeah, okay.
Not 700,000.
Not 700,000 aggregating that.
But when you look at the library chiller, which is gonna be a long,
Yeah,
you know, duration piece of equipment at 1.8, we're using that on the side balance.
You know, Brenda, as I think this thing for a caveat of the statute of limitation, my brain ended at 10 o'clock or 10.
If there was a
You know,
proposal, I wanted to consider.
I guess I throw what people think about, since we've had a lot of funding discussion, but I mean, it's very few things that we just categorically think it's a bad idea, but these questions, Mary's discussion, in this discussion on school budget, if it raises a lot of funding decisions and transparency decisions, and in the spirit of that, maybe we have at least a brief discussion about is there a better way to do this, like a stabilization fund that is not unassigned fund balance. And we can get all the chairs current and past, probably to give us some advice about what the proper avenue would be. But now the capital costs, you got a lot of data capital and a lot of emergencies that come out of nowhere. It seems to me that there should be an orderly way to anticipate that when a 30-year-old piece of equipment that's 15 years out of warranty, you know, it's in the sunset of its years. And there should be an orderly process to set aside money for what's going to be inevitable, and it should not wind up coming out of unassigned fund balance, I think. But my brain will go back on 6 o'clock tomorrow.
don't call them. That's just all I ask.
If anybody wants a phone
Yeah. Yeah, you're right, after 8, I'm kind of like typical. Any other comments? Thank you. Liaison updates? All right, and we do not have minutes. Housekeeping, I'm just going to remind everybody, I've moved things around a little bit based on these conversations, and I'm gonna go home tomorrow and tonight and see if they make sense for their move, but please, and I'll individually email you, let's please make sure. Yeah, we are. So 2 things, I guess I will say. 3/24, make sure that's still on your calendar. I was hoping we weren't gonna have it, but I can't be sure. And that's the following Tuesday, and April 14th, which was on the original list, but want to make sure everybody still knows it. That's the meeting where, at a minimum, there's a few things, but that will be voting the Article K number, as well as possibly voting whatever happens with GG.
Did you say the 16th?
14. Tuesday the 14th, and I'm sure there's a few other business items then, but that meeting is a definite. We need those votes, the week before town meeting.
So that is the 24th, the last meeting, because we have a deadline for work.
Yes.
So I just want to put
a
stake in that night for the snow.
Yeah.
Right, John?
Good point. What's that? The snow.
Your pointer out there for the.
We're taking care of it, me and
You'll be there, you'll be there anyway. It's just writing out the rest of the schedule.
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
I don't mean to be dramatic. But last year we did have meetings 3 nights in a row, 1 week, and we are right now, this is so fun. And we are really targeting a low number of meetings for March, and I just think you should be cautious.
I am.
About suggesting that the 18th, 19th, and 24th are the only meetings we'll have. I think people should just have some flexibility in their thinking, just in case.
Absolutely. Yes, Brenda.
Housekeeping item?
Yes.
Your HCAL liaison team is trying to put together a final set of data for our 3rd discussion of the HCAL project, which is scheduled for Thursday this week. Cost of the project, financing of the project, and impact on town finances in general. We put up in the Dropbox the outline of the materials that we are pulling together. If you look at it and see something, oh my goodness, I really want to know about such and such, please email me. We'll see what we can do. We are trying to pull data together. Some of it requires things coming out of the OPM and the architect. Some of it requires things coming out of Tom Mayo. Some of it requires things coming out of John Coughlin. So we will do the best we can to get as much ready for Thursday night as we can. If we can get it out to you all tomorrow, we will do so. If not, it'll be sometime Thursday, but anyway, that is our game plan. We are working at it, and if you grossly see something missing, please send me a quick email.
Thank you. And there's, yes.
When are you thinking we will vote on it?
Subject to the team's approval, I have moved it from the 18th to the 19th.
Allows at least
That allows
member to
one
be here.
team
Yes,
member to
very
be
good.
here. So.
Your pay is triple also.
No, so that's the night, and that is, as they say.
Week from this Thursday.
Elaine, you can't be here for the 19th.
I'm sorry, Elaine.
You can't call in.
Okay,
Stay flexible. Sorry, Carol. Good late.
it is. Let me see what we can do. Because I'm expecting that's probably not the only thing that's going to push us towards the 24th, but we'll see what we can do. And,
As
so
the-
again, please take a look at it, because if there are issues with this magical document, I want to know them sooner rather than later.
Is that in the Dropbox, Carol?
It
It's
is.
so helpful and
It is, and I'm gonna update it, so what's in there is wrong, because you'll see I've got little marks on it now, but I will put it in there. First thing you want, where is it in the Dropbox? No, it's okay. I expect it's, let's see.
that's really helpful.
Yeah, probably warrant articles, because that.
Okay.
It is what this is, but I think I'll move it to the very front page, I'm gonna put it, so it's not even in a folder. Yep, it's not even a folder, it's just gonna be right there on the page when you open it up. Yes,
Something
sir.
on the agenda's discussion next, Thursday on HCal. Just, have you been able to figure out from town clerk whether the voting article, saying this wrong, the ballot, is that gonna have a number in it? And do we have a deadline for that?
It's not gonna have a number.
It's not gonna have a number, and the deadline's either already passed or it's the same as this.
I think they voted it tonight.
I was just gonna say, yeah, the ballot, it doesn't have a number. There's some, it is, we will, it'll be there in town meeting. I mean, so we'll be announcing it a week before we get it, so, but yeah, no, it's not on the ballot. Yep.
There are a bunch of people emailing me to ask for it, so.
Okay.
It's already moved to the 19th.
It is, I was gonna talk to you about it before I finalize that, but yes, it's moved to the 19th for now, and we will, when we revisit this.
It's fine to move it, I just. There are a
Nope,
bunch of emails I have to sign.
Understood, and right now I would tell them, hopefully the 19th, possibly the 24th. There's another meeting.
23rd is always a hot day.
We do have the 26th, but that's my secret and no one else understands.
Could I maybe just make a plug that if people have warrant articles that have been voted and have not sent them to the editors?
So.
If you could, please.
You won't be allowed in the snug if it's not in a timely basis. Put it that way. Pardon me?
The night we vote the budget.
Yes, and so just a reminder next, so that we're looking at this, the 12th is going to be financial discussions part 3. The articles will be the Hingham Municipal Light EE, construction for active living, the reserve fund. If there's more to say, it's on the agenda. You can think about what that is. And then to hear and possibly vote the school budget. Well, actually, we're not voting. I'm staying corrected that we're gonna do all of them at once. So any clarification or questions on the school budget? It's not a re-presentation of what we have already heard. It's going to be abbreviated and to the point of the finances in the budget.
So we'll be a lot of Q&A on our part.
I hope so, and I think we've given, hopefully they have a heads up on the topics, and even tonight probably sheds a little light on that, but yes, I think there might be a few slides they're gonna wanna present, but it will not be a redo of the last presentation. As nice as that was, we're gonna stay the point. And maybe minutes.
Yes.
We'll see. And I appreciate it. We gave getting ready for the X. I mean, that's okay. So that is it. Nope, because I'm always bad about this. Any comments from the public on items not on the agenda? Seeing none.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
My glasses.
Alan
He knows how to be popular. All in favor? Aye. Thank you very much.